I'm sorry. Please accept my sincere apology.
Well, I'm sure you were doing something religious, so we can't really hold it too much against you. You were
Not
probably,
really.
even if you were sleeping, you might have been dreaming about liturgy, I'm sure. So you're
That's
covered.
possible. That's possible. No, I was renewing my driver's license online. What
Also, the
happened?
Lord's work.
Yeah, and then she was going to get started on her sock drawer. It's not you, Adam. It's not you, buddy. It's me. The only person Heather has
It's
ever forgotten to start a space for is me, like 3 times.
totally true. It's totally true.
I
The
told you my
only
superpower is I'm easily forgotten.
Yeah, right, Willabuster.
uh-oh, hang on.
I know it sounds like that, right? You'd think somebody who is a Willabuster, who's as loud and obnoxious as me, would be hard to forget about. But just wait, you'll see. I'm real easy to forget when I'm not there quickly, or if I stand still long enough in front of a beige colored wall. Right? Honestly,
I
it's my
don't know.
superpower.
I
I
don't
should be
know.
in the CIA.
I think about you lots since I seen those videos of you shooting shotguns. I'm kind of a little feared now.
It was totally novel to me that I could renew my driver's license online. I just thought it was a brilliant thing, and so I went and did it.
How long are licenses valid for in America?
The last one I got was in 2018. It'll vary by state, I think.
Right, because yeah, I forget about it. Well, I don't know how you do it anymore because we have once you get to be a gold license here in Australia, they renew them for 10 years.
Yeah, this is what, 8 years. So yeah, I haven't had to. And if your driver's license picture is so like next time I'll have to go in um because my driver's license picture will be more than 9 years old. So yeah. Anyway, that was fun. I'm sorry, Will. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
My
What time is it?
the Canadian me's coming out. I'm sorry. Let's see. Well, it is currently Tuesday, June 9th in much of the world, but not all of the world. So let's check out what time it is where. Lord Hereford's Knob, it is 1:08 a.m. And in Wankum, Germany, it is 2:08 a.m. In Ukraine, at the pirate ship, it is 3:08 a.m. And in the workers' paradise of Cockman Bluff, Australia, it is 8:09 a.m. At the Kinky University in Osaka, Japan, it is 9:09 a.m. And in Peculiar Knob, it is 9:39 a.m. People half an hour off. And Mount Misery in Australia, it is 10:09 a.m. And now back to Monday, June 8th, where we normal people are from. In Dildo, well, they didn't name their place a normal name. In Dildo in Newfoundland, it is 9:39 p.m. And in Colon, Michigan, it is 8:09 p.m. In Eyebrow, Saskatchewan, it is 7:10 p.m. They changed it on me. And in Dickfield, Colorado, it is 6:10 p.m. In Portland, Oregon, well, let's see, Beaver Creek is close by. In Beaver Creek, Oregon, Ohio, it is 5:10 p.m. And in Chickaloon, Alaska, it is 4:10 p.m. Alaska, where Sarah Palin can see Russia from her house. She stalks me, and there's a lever or something, and good God, I am so sorry. And the stupid thing is I'm still knee deep in the DMV trying to figure out if I can renew my handicap permit online or if I need to go into the freaking DMV, because that would be a pain in the ass.
So Newfoundland is funny with names. I didn't meet him, but my sister worked with a fellow, and he was 20 at the time, which means he was born in the 80s. So not that long ago. And his family name was Head. And his parents decided to give him the first name Oral. So he was walking around with the name Oral Head. Okay, moving on.
Oi, there you go. Will, did you get your co-host invite? Will?
Oh, he's on. I just saw him switch over. And he packed the nest.
There he is. There we go. All right, I have you guys on, I guess. Will, are you there? That sounded sort of chaotic and like then he
Oh,
muted.
he's requesting now. Oh, he's
I see.
recycling now.
Yep.
See if James is requesting. Okay, he'll talk to me about something other than Ukrainian Greek Catholic liturgy. Yeah, is that? Yeah, so I don't know. Looks like he was having some technical problems, folks. We've got some booms in the nest. That's the one I wanted to talk about first. Was Belgorod. Hey, I heard you. And I didn't hear him no more. So yeah, there was a boom in that Belgorod. This wasn't the arsenal.
There we go. Let's see if it works this time.
Yep, working good. And there was an explosion in Belgorod, and reports are that it was actually a cab bomb that fell short and that fell on their own arsenal full of missiles and Iskander and S-300 missiles. Big sads. Wah, wah.
It sounds like a way to get out of work if you were a genocidal pilot and you just didn't want to. If you just woke up in the morning and looked at your face in the mirror and realized that you were killing women and children every day and you didn't want to do it anymore.
It's true. Sabotage does rise significantly when enemies decide they want to quietly quit a war and not fight it anymore. Sabotage and partisan activity picks up greatly in occupied areas just before armies collapse and disappear. It has happened before, which is why I also. But that explosion in Belgorod, you can always tell, of course. Ammunition depots like that because they do make the extra fireworky, nice secondary explosions, but they do tend to go up like that all at once and make a big, nice orangish or gray cloud as it rises, and that's what we have here. So that's clearly an ammunition detonation. Don't really care if
and
it's
the streamers.
The streamers are great, aren't they?
It's so decorative.
Don't really care if it's sabotage, accident, or a strike, but we don't see any evidence of a drone strike by Ukraine there.
Yes, Lexi said, my favorite word, acceleration. But it's just accelerating every day. We used to get excited about some bavovna once or twice a week, as you recall, and it wasn't that long ago. But yeah, the streamers, the size of it, the crying over it, and yeah, the fact that it was self-inflicted. It's just perfect. Is this the perfect bavovna? It's so pretty, too.
It definitely qualifies in the running of boom of the day, of course, because yeah, it's very uniform and very attractive, very pretty. Love the streamers.
10 out of 10.
I'm gonna go 9 out of 10 because nothing's perfect. It would have been 8 out of 10, but if it's self-inflicted, I'm gonna add a point. But it's not quite perfect because it should have that continually expanding, boiling orange interior that I like to make it really pretty.
See, I'm the Banderite judge on the panel. I'm just like 10 out of 10 to everything. Go ahead, James.
I was going to say 3 Russians were killed or injured. 10 out of 10.
I was going to say Nadia Comaneci was supposedly perfect. Anyway, sorry about that. No, I just wanted to say all the counting coup kind of thing, that just going really close to the spief, the whole thing with the parade, the secret letter that wasn't supposed to be shared but was publicly. All these things are little touches. Not that exploded anything. They did in the one case at least. Um, they really owned the Russians many times over, and I think it's going to drive Putin nuts. He's already shut down the rating system for the governmental popularity thing, and I don't blame him. It sucks there. It's like, but he's pulled a Trump, and if you pull a Trump, that's bad.
Yeah, and the other thing that's happened is you're absolutely correct. That Ukraine is doing a masterful job of trolling the Russians heavily in the last week, and this is the sort of thing that will get through to the population, right? Like, you try as they might to shut down the internet, information is getting into Russia. I can tell you from personal experience, and it is. They get it. People that are younger people especially get the subtlety and the discussion. For instance, Zelensky's recent uh, quip about Putin saying the letter was rude and him replying that, wow, you should have read the first version. That sort of response uh, cuts through, as well as his discussion with Sky News. Now, him doing the news is a terrible thing for Russia because these people love talking to Zelensky, and he's spitting the truth about the internet and other things. He notes that Ukrainian soldiers aren't restricted from using the internet or Telegram. They can use it to contact their families while they're at the front if they're in a downtime from killing orcs. But note that Russia continually shuts down the internet in full and regularly restricts capability of it. He goes, but there's it's not primarily a defensive move. It's that Russia doesn't want information to be shared easily, and they absolutely don't want people talking about the fact that when there are massive strikes going on and the government can't protect them, or the government is in fact launching uh, surface to air missiles from right adjacent to or on top of apartment buildings. And those systems are poorly produced, uh, poorly designed, corruptly certified. They tend to seek out 13-story apartment blocks. That you could look through the internet video libraries and see dozens and dozens of Pantsir missiles going through the sides of apartment blocks with plenty of evidence of their tail sections left behind and things like that. You are at much as risk of friendly fire from surface to air missiles or poorly directed anti-aircraft fire, because we've all seen the bullet hose that goes off in areas where Russia is trying to defend from strikes like Novorossiysk and Tuapse, and you're at more risk of injury or death in Moscow and, well, in any major location where Ukraine's going to attack strategic targets than you are from the shells. Look at St. Petersburg. I mean, the beauty of that.
Did you switch hands?
Did I? Oh, yeah. The beauty of that precision strike, the day that conference started, happen right at 6 o'clock in the morning when everybody would start to be arriving. Take out an oil terminal, a fuel import terminal, right just 10 kilometers from the location with a big, pretty fireball fire, and then strike the naval base 2 days. Well, one first on the day, and then at the end of the conference, strike that naval base again, both with no reported civilian casualties, none. So it's a real these things are sending a real message inside Russia, and don't kid yourself. Like I've been talking about for a long time, the social impacts. Russia is not going to have a popular uprising and end this war, but social cohesion and participation in the war effort by Russians is a significant factor here in causing them to ultimately withdraw. So these things are very important to speak directly to the Russian people. That's what Zelensky's able to do on television. That's what the letter to Russia did. That's what the signature strikes that Ukraine is producing each and every day to make Russians understand you're not safe. Your government's not helping you. This war is pointless, and relatively soon, the population in Russia will start talking about whether or not the economy and society will survive at all with hyperinflation setting in, rationing. That if they haven't already, they'll be telling people that you can't quit your job and you have to show up whether or not you're getting paid or not, a la the Soviet Union times, and they will, or even in the Tsarist times, the serfdom that continued, and mark my words, when the soldiers stop getting paychecks that neither they can spend nor their officers can coerce out of them, uh, the effort to fight at the front will be virtually zero, and it'll have to be virtually zero because the supply efforts of Russia are demonstrably not getting through to the front now. The medium range strikes, Adam, are devastating supply to the Russian military, and the farthest reaches of that supply route out on the Kinburn Spit now is reliably reported by multiple authors, including the ISW, that Russia is withdrawing the 337th Infantry from the Kinburn Spit area that their special operators have been using as a forward observation post for a long time. Not majorly militarily significant, but will be blinding for some of the capabilities of Russia to see what's happening inside Mykolaiv and Odessa areas, and is a withdrawal's a withdrawal. They can paint it however they want, but if they collapse and withdraw from the Kinburn Spit, it reduces the length of the front line that Ukraine needs to cover, but also Russia. But Russia hasn't got the supplies, so it doesn't matter how many guys you've got in fighting positions. If the beans, bullets, and bandages don't show up, you're not ready. I think Chuck called them. If you're inside Ukraine, Chuck Fires used to say, if you're in there and you don't have any beans, bullets, and bandages, you're nothing but a hobo. And so there's going to be a lot of hobos in the west of Kherson and in Zaporizhia and Donetsk and Luhansk in the near future. So let's hope that Ukraine is able to absolutely maximize these mid-range strike capabilities and cause supply collapse all over that front line in the south of Ukraine and in Crimea, and we see more abandonments like this, a planned abandonment of a unit to be withdrawn from an area, or people just decide to start vote with their feet as the probes come from Ukraine. And there is every sign, if you look at Siersky's monthly report for May, that the probing to contact is continuing from Ukraine's side, and they are taking some tactically advantageous territory, although their main focus isn't, of course, to take territory, it's to kill Russians. I think a goal that, Adam, you can get behind.
I sure can. And we don't know if it was planned from above or planned from below. What I could see happening is, though, that commander in the area made multiple requests because his guys were literally starving or thirsting to death in their areas. And it's like when the blood flow gets really bad in an unhealthy person's body, they start losing those extraneous digits at the end that the blood has the hardest time to get through the smallest veins. And that's the exact metaphor. So, and I feel like that break will happen when the commander next to the Spit or whatever the next spot, whenever they stop allowing that request to withdrawal to go through, that's when stuff will hit fans, I think, Will.
Yeah, and I don't know how the 337th had decided this. Whether it's there's a very possibly not a lot of good information being passed up to the top. So maybe the local commanders decided to withdraw themselves due to lack of supply and sent one of those, vaguely things that we're planning to withdraw unless A, B, and C happens. So please get back to us. And then A, B, and C, of course, never happened. Probably never even got an answer. So he decided to start to withdraw himself, or middle range to high command decided that they'd abandon those positions because they'd worked out that they weren't going to be able to supply, and they allowed them to move to more areas that were allowed. I think it's probably more likely the former, though, that you have unit commanders covering areas of responsibility that probably are using license to make withdrawals themselves, because within their area of responsibility and the Soviet doctrine that they're still working from, if you find yourself in an untenable position, you are allowed to change uh, uh, the coverage you've got and the places you're currently defending, but not if it's explicitly not allowed by the top command or directed by the top command. But I don't think communications back and forth to the top command is working all that well. And or if it is working, uh, it's it may technically be functioning, but there's not a lot of good back and forth going on, because clearly uh, Putin, Gerasimov, the folks at the top are either being lied to or are lying themselves. And we talked about how before how you're not helping yourself at all if you're lying continually to your own units up and down the line in both directions, because as we've noted before, near Kupiansk in the north, you can't call air support and artillery strikes down on areas that you say you already hold. So lying to the military command is and capturing land on credit and those sorts of things that they do long term will hurt you, not help you. Being as honest as possible with your commanding and up and down the line of command is is always the best policy, frankly. If you tell a unit that they're cut off from supply, they're in trouble, give them all the advice you can to help them hold their position. But say, you have to hold those positions. They're going to be in a lot better shape than if you just cut off all their supply and you cut off communication to them, or you lie to them. You're not onto a winner there. But here's the bad news, folks. Prepare, and this is already happening. As Russia gets starved of supply in the Kinburn Spit and in Kherson and Crimea and Zaporizhia areas, unfortunately, one of the things that's going to happen throughout history as that army becomes starved of supply, especially if they're directed to hold their positions and not withdraw, is they will start to be far more cruel to the local population that they're supposed to be there to liberate. If you've got a store of anything in Kherson and the areas we've heard about already that are being brutally repressed south of Kherson City and in that area down toward Crimea, it's likely to get significantly worse. And we've already heard the Ukrainians talk about an amnesty for allowing anybody who lives in that area to be able to voluntarily withdraw across, into the Ukrainian side, just abandon their properties and withdraw. We've heard that talk before. We've seen the safaris that Russia mounts into Kherson City in the north. We know that they're interested in being repressive and cruel for a point, and we know that once they start to starve, they will absolutely take that out on the local population in both just cruelty as well as eliminating the local population's capability to get food, fuel, water, whatever it is. They'll start treating them very poorly, I think. And so brace yourself for some of that as supply becomes restricted to Russians. But I'm a little bit surprised, Adam, how quickly this this potential withdrawal is already starting due to supply shortages, because this really only started. I mean, it's been happening for a while. The remote strikes have been a capability for maybe about 2 months. I think we've started to hear them apply the Hornets way down on the road. But the key is, since the last 2 weeks of May, this has really been going on. And I had predicted that it would be until probably the 1st of July before we'd be able to see some concrete effects of cutting off supply. But it looks like it might be happening even quicker, which I'm very happy to be proved wrong if it continues.
It shows the brittleness. I just love it. Like, I feel like what we were talking about in the last couple of weeks, the long range strikes on infrastructure, on energy, oil things, that was able to be a slow burn because they're sort of just hollowing out the system and just making it like just like drilling through the center of every 2x4 in the house and just hollowing it to this brittle thing that's barely standing. And it has been 2 months, but every other technological advancement in this war has been brought on through battlefield testing and whatever. So by the nature, it's been slow and evolutionary, and the orcs kind of see every step of that evolution. Whereas this is just sort of like, it's like they peppered them up, they drilled out their legs till they were hollow. And then this mid-range strike campaign is like a haymaker uppercut to the face out of nowhere. And that's how I see it. And it just shows the brittleness of it. And this whole time they've been surviving because they can absorb all of these smaller blows, but Ukraine has never had a chance to, before this, to really like surprise them with 1,000 a day right now out of nowhere. I'm so happy about it.
Yeah, the ramp up in volume of production has continued on Ukraine's side for the FP1 and FP2s in particular, and it seems to have been combined relatively closely within a couple of months of these Hornet. If you're going to be a tech bro oligarch, be a Schmidt instead of a Musk, because Eric Schmidt, who has come over to Ukraine about a year ago and announced that he was going to get involved in setting up, assisting with companies that are doing drones to enhance them with AI type technology, and you'd have to say that his efforts have really borne fruit, funding and developing this Hornet drone, which has allowed these strikes 150 kilometers south of Ukrainian positions, which really has. It's not done it by itself, but it's really been the catalyst to increase this collapse in supply for Russia, or the ability for Ukraine to collapse Russia's supply, I think.
Absolutely. Alan just message. Sorry, I was reading Alan's message.
Yeah, no, I was reading that too. I agree. This shaping operation, by cutting off Ukrainian or Russian supply, with all exerting fire control over the rail line and the road all down through Zaporizhia and down through to Crimea. I would normally have expect that shaping operation to go on for a couple of months, which is why I said I think we'll start to see effects as of about the 1st of July. And regardless of if it's showing effects now early, I would still expect it to go on for a while. It'll go on even if Ukraine starts some sort of offensive operations, because they could just cut off all their supply, let Soviet doctrine require Russia to still keep up their mode of attack, and just just stick to their knitting. The plan's working. Stick to your knitting. You don't need to do brazen, difficult, and risky operations to take back land, because
We tried that in
eliminating Russians when they
2023.
yeah, eliminating Russians every day when they show up is working just fine. And as long as the Russian military command continues to make mistakes, like the big mistake of carrying on with attritional warfare as if it's going to win them big prizes, then please continue. You know, the other thing that's going to happen here is, as we move through June into July, maybe August time, Russia's infiltration attempts into Kostiantynivka are, they're still creeping in there. They're still working their way in. They've started the process of using thermobarics and using incendiaries on the neighborhoods, as Chuck reported 2 days ago. They're using incendiaries on residential areas inappropriately. Sure, it's white phosphorus that produces smoke and allows them to do some infiltration, but it's also being used inappropriately on areas where population density is highest. So they're using it in a war crimey way, but they'll try to get away with it. They're also going to be heavily using the thermobarics. So they're gonna eke their way into Kostiantynivka, even though Ukraine still holds area of all the city proper. Russia, I would expect, is going to grind their way into the center of Kostiantynivka by August. And when they do that, they will ballyhoo that as a huge success inside Russia and in the military command. And it'll be a success of it's going to be a very, very Pyrrhic victory, because they will have lost once again so much to try to get into Kostiantynivka, which I will remind you isn't going to win them the war. Kostiantynivka is down in a valley. Ukraine still has fire control over that area from the area of Chasiv Yar that they still hold, and Russia will be totally burned out. So if they're totally burned out, and they managed to eke their way into Kostiantynivka and claim a glorious victory like they did in Kupiansk, they're not going to have any motivation to change their mode of attack, which is losing them the war. So even their victories will feed into their ultimate defeat. And Kostiantynivka, that southern part of Kostiantynivka, is already destroyed anyway. I mean, this is Russia. Russia's using the same mode of attack they're doing there as everywhere. When times get tough, pound it into oblivion, and then just try to capture the rubble that remains. And if you run into any obstacles, use poison gas, use thermobarics, and use white phosphorus to try to burn everybody out. That's the war criming ramps up just before Russia feels like it's capable of taking over a place, and the pattern continues here at Kostiantynivka. But mark my words, we'll be talking about a Russian taking of Kostiantynivka eventually, this summer, once they finally eke their way into the center of the city. But at 35,000 casualties a month, and all the other problems we've been talking about, it isn't going to be a parade-worthy victory. Kostiantynivka isn't.
I just don't think they're going to get over the loss of Molotok-Machka after it was the longest siege in
World War history, right?
And then they lost the five-house village somehow after it was sieged for longer than
1,600 days.
Yeah, but longer than I was trying to think of a historical siege, like go way back, but then my brain blanked. Something like with the Persians and the Samarites or something I just made up. Right, James?
It's a lot longer than Stalingrad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they and it will feed into it, and because those guys are already hungry and they're being pushed forward in that strange infiltratey way, which is just so Orky and Soviet. They have they start with groups of 5 guys and 6 guys, split them up, and then put them with some other guys. As they move forward, they switch your crew that you're with like multiple times and just go to that house, go to that house. Don't tell them if enemies there or friends are there. And this is all just to disorient and make it almost impossible for these guys to surrender or retreat, because they're just sort of send them on this goose chase on their way up. And they're like, that requires in itself a whole bunch of logistics, because the idea is infiltration groups, they don't have a trunk to put their crap in. So everything they have is carried on their back. Plus, they're not given a gun until the last stop. And all of this stuff has to get to all of their little secret hovels that they've dug out of the rubble points on the way up to the gray zone. And it has to get there. And the harder it gets, those skinny little veins are going to lose their supply first, right? Because as it gets, they're gonna have to be rationing, and the dudes who are furthest to get to, where it's the most dangerous to feed these orc hovels in the furthest reaches, are going to get cut off first.
Yeah, that's right. The sclerosis is going to end right at the very end of the line. But notice how I'll note that the thing that's making Russian bloggers really pissed off this morning in Australia time, or nighttime, as they've gone to bed, or they're going to bed. They're writing the last thing before they go to bed, and they get quite grumpy. Peskov made a statement yesterday that imagine being in Crimea and suffering the fuel shortages that they've got. I mean, seeing yourself firsthand what we've seen a lot of video evidence about, and statements from the governor and everything like that. Imagine Peskov saying on national television that we're seeing many manifestations of completely unjustified panic buying, and that's what's causing the problems there. Let's remember how a couple of years ago, if you recall, people in Moscow and other major cities across our country were buying up buckwheat in bulk, even though there was no buckwheat shortage. Sometimes these kinds of emotional reactions create artificial problems. But once again, all authorities are working to ensure there are no shortages. Adam, there are no shortages of fuel in Crimea. It's all panic buying. Is that the sort of statement from the top you want to help have reassure you if you're suffering shortages?
Absolutely, especially if it's immediately followed by boop, and then Swan Lake, but for 17 hours. No,
Well, it's not covered by that yet, but what it is followed by right now is air raid signs, because Katya and Kerch have suffered air raid attacks again in the last 4 hours as well.
that's excellent. Yeah, I think it's just so brittle. I see. I can't wait to read the books about Budanov's long range planning for this, because he's the guy who's been since like late 2022 has been like, oh yes, they will collapse, and we will make sure of it. And you won't know how, but it'll happen. Um, yeah, they can't, and it's just, I love these emperor has no clothes moments, because they have no answer to when things look really bad, because their only answer is pretending that they're still good. Because a real leader, looks the people in the eye and says, okay, this is what's going on. This is what we have to do. Like a lot of our leaders did during COVID. Whatever you think about that, there was a big panic. The world was upside down, and we were, whatever you think about in your particular jurisdiction, what the failure or success of those policies were, they told us what was going on to their best of their knowledge, and they reacted to a real situation that people saw was happening. And so
Absolutely,
when you have
and the way you speak to your people during times of crisis is really telling.
it totally is, yeah. So and it's one of those things that you can't, like, no amount of conditioning, social conditioning, can really insulate you from seeing on your TV everything is fine, and then looking out your condo window and there's a 17-story pillar of fire from the refinery a block away. It's just, yeah, there's no amount
Right,
of
and there's a
conditioning that.
big difference between leaders that tell the tell their population the truth during times of crisis and those who say you're not seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not. Yeah, I mean, even at this point, if they leveled with them, they might. They probably wouldn't be able to pull it out, but they would be able to definitely reduce panic a lot more if this facade of omnipotence didn't have to be always filleted into existence. Well, I'm going to stop talking now.
No, that's fine. And look, it's this is what whether I'm talking about the military, you're doing your military no good whatever if you're perpetuating lies up and down the chain of command. You are also doing your society no good long term if you're not being honest with them about the nature of problems and how you're actually going to work out of them. If as we've seen in the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, all of the information that came out about the economy was you're not seeing what you're seeing. I'm going to make up a story to tell you what you're seeing, and it doesn't match any sort of maths or gravity or anything like that, right? You know, Putin characterizing the fall in the Russian economy as being rightly due to the fact that oil and gas revenues have fallen to 20% of revenue in the budget from 50% of the revenue in the budget. And to suggest that that is just a regular, natural transition from an oil and gas economy to economy driven by other things, as if productivity and Russia was selling computers and AI data centers and, you know, all this new stuff. People can look around and see we're not making anything new. We're not even making toilets in this country. So, you know, if you want a toilet, you're buying a Chinese porcelain. That they literally see this across the board, whether it's in St. Petersburg or way out in the Far East. Product substitution in Ukraine, in Russia, has gone. Chinese products in the supermarkets have gone from next to nothing, which were specialty things, to being about a third of the shelf space filled up with Chinese products now in Russian stores. That in and of itself is a psychological drain on the Russians. And when you tell them that the hospital that was being built is stopped being built, the school teachers are stopped being paid, they're not doing any, they're not repairing the roads. You know, they're just not doing anything because the government in the oblast has been told they have to raise, they have to give everybody a bonus if they join the military to go fight for Russia. When Russia doesn't return anything, the federal government doesn't return anything to the oblasts anymore. They're cutting them off of the stipends that they provide for federal programs like hospitals and schools and roads that are supposed to be paid for or subsidized on a universal basis across Russia. They're just the money's not coming to do that thing. But we still want you to go on and do everything you're supposed to do in your plan. When you tell people that you know, we're in a natural transition from one type of bullshit. I mean, they say bullshit. Honestly, the amount of things that would have been thrown at TVs if somebody had to sit in Russia and listen to a summary of the things said at that St. Petersburg Economic Forum, they would be aghast. And any of them who actually know anything about anything, when Putin looked straight into the camera and said that they'd taken 2.4 million square kilometers of territory inside Ukraine, could look at a map or ask Google or ask the Yandex, what's the area of Ukraine? And it would come back and say it's 640,000 square kilometers. So we've taken 4 times the amount of territory in Ukraine than exists in all of Ukraine. That's what you're telling me. Yeah. That honestly, that's the howlers that were told at that spief are literally cherries on the top. Well, they're the content. They're the shit in the shit burger. But the opening and closing ceremonies presided over by Ukraine are beautiful. The lies told in the center are things that are going to make people want to spit up, and the other displays, the art displays, and the robots that didn't work, and all the attempts to do the the high society sort of stuff that they tried to do this year was literally a joke. I mean, I'm sure the Taliban probably left that. Their delegation probably went back to Kabul and said, "Jesus, what a piece of shit that thing was." I'm glad. I wonder why we never got invited to that before. I mean, it was that bad. And the commentary that's now coming out after the St. Petersburg Economic Forum had happened is already chipping away at the credibility of the Russian leadership inside Russia. You are doing your country no favors if you don't tell them the truth. If Russia really wanted to do a mobilization and thought it had the people on its side, it would tell them the truth about the national interest here, and that we need to do another major mobilization so that we can finally win this war and move on to our better future. But the better future that they've painted for Russia isn't. Everybody knows it's imaginary. Everybody knows they're not going to share in a brighter future. And if Russia was
And it's
able to
also war projected till 2036 anyways, even within
exactly,
this country.
yeah. I mean, you've got the leaders like Sechin, and the people that laid out their scenarios, saying that war is going to go on for 2 more generations, and the Russian people will take that.
They'll take it and they'll take it, but they won't take it to a point. I guess we'll see, because the difference for me is every spoof we've seen and all of these things, like we've seen Russian robots screw up before. They do it all the time. I've never seen a Russian robot not be messed up. So but it's always us. It's always NAFO or on Volya Radio or wherever. We're making fun of it. But the difference that I see now is the war bloggers are angry about it. They're seeing the ridiculousness of that farce now, and they're speaking up about it, whereas they never did before. That line has been crossed.
Yes, and like you're seeing some defections. The major war blogger that's evacuated himself and his family to Vietnam and decided not to return from holidays is sending out some blistering stuff now. I guess he's trying to test whether or not the FSB still has a presence in Vietnam, because the stuff he's putting out now is uh, really, really fire and really insightful of others who are still in Russia to rise up against things. But that's easy for him to do from the relative safety of Vietnam when he's got his family out. But it's every little bit helps. I mean, he's essentially presenting it, true or not, as if everybody who he knew in Russia, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, agrees with him. It's just that they're not willing to speak up about it. I don't know, but I did like Natalka covers these things regularly, that she puts his translations of this guy's stuff out, and it's interesting because one of the things that he said, he characterized in his latest video, is the people commenting to him in Russia to him about when he was talking about the conditions inside Russia and the leadership and all this. He described it perfectly, because his friends said to him, I forget his name, Igor or whatever, why do you describe things in such Aesopian terms, dancing around the subject in a way? But because that's the way you have to do it. Anybody who recognizes, who's understands the Russian character for a long period of time, will recognize the manner in which they used language in order to criticize the government, but keep themselves from getting arrested and disappeared or dying in a prison cell accidentally. And this is what the guy described, what and how he described it. It's like Aesop's fables. reading reading these things is you have to be able to decipher it. So, and if you want a good flavor of it, uh, if you want to delve into it yourself, do what Ming does, and I love Ming because he reads Sargrad, so I don't have to. But he follows Sargrad TV well in Russia, whereas I'm just reading the Kommersant and the Izvestia and the newspapers and stuff. But he reads Zargrad TV because they delve into real fantasy sort of stuff and fan fiction, things like that. But what they do is when they want to criticize the government, like they did yesterday, when they want, they'll speak about unnamed Kremlin officials who want to, who will tell them, and they'll tell the facts that they want to put out. But at the end of the story, they'll swap over to a bit of rah-rah nationalism that supports the position of the government fully on what they've said. Literally, sometimes making the statements the talking points of the government that they've most recently put out. So they'll spend the first half of the article absolutely tearing down the government and their position and the absurdity and all that sort of stuff. But then they'll swap over and say, toe the government line toward the end. This is the pattern of how commentators in Russia who I don't know, I guess they journalists who want to have maintain some credibility, but they aren't willing to die for their cause, if you will. That's how they write, and this is why you have to take everything from Russia as a lie, but you can tease out of some of the stuff that gets produced in Russia to sort of build up a picture of what you think is really happening, and then only after you have this picture of what you think might be happening do you then go to completely independent sources outside and see if you can verify what you're seeing with surrogate information to try to build a concrete method or theory of what's actually happening inside Russia. This is, how you deal with the opaque.
Yeah, it's it's pretty amazing how I was just kind of going through Natalka's. I realized I hadn't seen a post from Natalka in a couple days when you mentioned her. Yeah, and I
They're
did not
repressing
notice that
her.
particular. Well, maybe, yeah. I
Come
have
see
no
the
idea,
violence inherent in the system.
but yeah, the start and end thing. I wonder if they have specific knowledge of how these things are screened or looked at too, or maybe they've got a better chance if they don't put any criticism in the first or last paragraph. But I'm sure that's not the case today in the digital world. But I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to know. I just love how brittle it is. I can't. I did not expect this to go this fast. I know Alan was saying we're impatient, but I think it'll be follow through. It's kind of what you've been saying for the last couple of weeks. I don't think they're going to have to go and try and bust in and do any crazy maneuver warfare with drones in the air instead of F-16s and A-50s or whatever. They don't. They don't need to do that. They won't need to do that. They have surveillance of every centimeter of the gray zone. And once dudes start leaving, like you said, voting with their feet, I think they're going to be able to follow on. And it's just a contest now. I think it's like a race between whether the home front collapses for them or the battlefront collapses for them first. Will.
Yeah, so that you want some more good news for Ukraine, bad news for Russia on the economic front. The summary of oil movements is out right now. Now, this is oil movements up until prior to Gruzhevaya being struck again yesterday, which, by the way, is still on fire, and the fire looks to have spread inside the facility from looking at firms right now. This is the major oil and gas terminal storage area northeast of Novorossiysk port. This is the place where all the CPC oil and the Shakaris crude oil goes down to the port. So these are the numbers before this latest strike, but it's going to add pain to Russia's numbers, which show that, no surprise, this won't surprise you at all, Adam, there have been no oil movements out of Tuapse. Surprised? No, no, no,
No,
no.
not surprised
Yeah,
at all.
yeah. So Tuapse is showing exactly what we expected after several days of strikes in May on the oil export terminal, and then the refinery. That nothing's moving out of that area. However, significant movement has taken place at Novorossiysk, because it's been been a little while, a month or so, since the last attacks down at the oil export terminal
Why is
itself.
that name familiar lately? There's something happened there.
Oh, Shakaris or Novorossiysk.
No, it's Novorossiysk. Yeah,
Yeah,
the things
Novorossiysk,
there.
because the oil, they started striking the major storage. This is the I think we're entering the fuck's no longer given phase by Ukraine, because Ukraine was striking the Shakaris oil export terminal, but they were kind of avoiding the CPC storage before. This is the Caspian Petroleum Consortium, which Russia is partly owned, but the oil primarily comes from the Kazakhstan, and and it's mostly owned by Chevron. So they were kind of avoiding the Chevron assets before, but nowadays they're going, you know what? If we really need to shut off cash flow to Russia, we're going to have to hit this Glushova oil terminal or the tank farm for it. And they've done it twice now. And this second strike looks to be significantly more extensive than the first one a while back. So expect these numbers to fall significantly. But at Novorossiysk, oil in the last period a month was down 0.5 million barrels per day. So not much. It's dropped a bit, but oil products from it have halved. So Russia is clearly restricting products, gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. We know from the last 2 weeks of May, they have canceled any export sale of any of those products. So we do see that effect. But what we see is crude volume is pretty much close to the baseline of what they intended to move daily out of those facilities. CPC vessels moving 0.837 million barrels a day. So they're moving about what they would expect to do, close to 1 million barrels a day there, and oil product shipments are down, as I said, half of what they were previously out of there. But the Caspian consortium pipeline is apparently capable of being back in service, so they're moving stuff from that. Shakaris is also working to make up some of that crude shipment. So it's just about normal at Novorossiysk. But remember, this is just before the attacks took place at Glushkovas or at Glushovaya. So kind of close to regular service at Novorossiysk. Nothing coming out of Tuapse. Taman isn't reported because it's relatively minor, but it'll probably step up in importance to Russia. But back at Ust-Luga, they're actually moving a tiny bit more than 800,000 barrels a day out of Ust-Luga, which is a bit more than they were doing prior to the. It's about a 700,000 barrel a day average out of Ust-Luga. They've stepped that up to 800,000 barrels a day, which means that facility should be ripe for the picking again. And Primorsk is, because Primorsk suffered extensive damage. Ust-Luga suffered some damage, some impressive losses at the crude tanks area and one of the 6 loading bays. But the real damage that was done there was to the product shipment area up at the condensate facility. That facility is down drastically for moving product, but they're back up to pushing out more crude than average there. And that's probably because Primorsk suffered extensive damage to the tank farms and the pumping capabilities, but not much damage yet to the loading facilities at the port itself, which we're hoping to see in the next strike. But the last week, oil loading is high, 1.92 million barrels per day, but down. Adjustment was down about a half a million barrels per day for oil products, but they've managed to step up crude a little bit, uh, uh, but down about 0.18 million, 180,000 barrels a day from what they were doing prior to any of the attacks up there. So a mixed bag on crude exports for Russia. We could definitely need to see some more attention to Ust-Luga and Primorsk. We'll have a look at what these effects of this latest terminal strikes at Novorossiysk are, but Tuapse is out of the picture, it would appear. And oil products, we know, are banned. So no jet fuel, no gasoline, and no diesel from secondary sellers. Diesel can still be sold if you're Rosneft or Gazprom and you're producing material right from the well and you're making it into diesel fuel, you can sell some of that, but you can't sell any kerosene or gasoline, and nobody who buys diesel from you can resell it. And this is part of the oil products that are being moved here. So Russia has stepped up as much crude as it can push out, even through damaged systems, and it is selling a lot of heavy diesel called mazut. Now they're selling a lot of heavy diesel, mazut, because they can't refine it. Refinery strikes have been so successful of late, especially the big ones, that Russia's oil refining capacity is likely reduced to more than 40% of it being offline or incapable of meeting production. So they're producing a lot of straight run gasoline, kerosene, and diesel, automotive diesel, to be able to keep up with demand inside Russia, which we know has become critical. And as a result, they're producing a lot of waste byproduct from primary distillation, which is mazut, heavy fuel oil, and they're selling that at a discount to India primarily, but China as well. So they're moving a lot of oil to China. They're moving a lot of crude oil. Cosmino has jumped up to 125% of capacity out the east coast of Russia. So they're selling a lot of crude oil, and they're selling waste diesel fuel, essentially, heavy diesel fuel that they would normally refine into very expensive products. They're dumping at a discount, but they're selling those products to China and India at such a discount that despite the fact that volumes have gone up and prices have gone through the roof, with the Iran war, Russia's still getting 20% less revenue off of the oil that they're selling than they were prior to the war commencing. So bad news continues in the oil and gas area for Russia with regard to export dollars, Adam. So that's also very good news for Ukraine. And what was really nice? It's really nice to sit and watch this stuff for a long period of time, as I have been, and finally have just not finally, but have people come in and pile on with support for that worldview. 2.5, 3 years after we started talking about it. I remain and have always been of the view that the best strategic strikes that can be made by Ukraine are on oil and gas production, refining, and transport and distribution. This is the way. Stop their capability to raise euros and dollars to buy things that are expensive that they can't make inside Russia, and just generally reduce their capability to fund their war effort is the way to end this war strategically. And coupled with their phenomenally smart approach of cutting off logistics with the medium strike drones, honestly, this effort by Ukraine has since especially since the United States has voided itself from the discussion, meaning not providing anything, but not also coercing Ukraine to make decisions that they like that aren't necessarily in Ukraine's benefit. Ukraine operating independently. I hate to give anybody a 10 out of 10, Adam, but it's a very high 8 or 9 out of 10. I would say the efforts here, and it's reinforced now. When we had our interview with Andrei Besanov in the simulcast with INW the other day, which you should go watch. We should watch if you want to see. If you're really into middle-aged white men, you can see it on YouTube, or you can just listen to it on Spotify because we simulcast it. But for some people, that for some reason people love to see middle-aged white men talking about stuff. But Andrei Besanov is the voice that you want to hear in all of that. And there's a lot of really good content in that interview. But one of the key things that I thought that Andrei brought up that is in support of my long-term worldview is that the way to win this war is to eliminate Russia's capacity to sell oil and gas. He said it. I was silently applauding on my side of the screen, and it's nice to see that pile on. And you see it now from Fareed Zakaria, the Financial Times, Bloomberg. Everybody's now getting on this bus. I can basically stop talking about it if I wanted to, because everybody now knows what I've known with since Beefy and I were first advocating it at the end of 2023, that the way to beat Russia is to take their cash.
And their roads now. It's like they've been taking the cash for a long time, driving them towards bankruptcy. And now they can't even drive to work because, they can't get there.
Yeah, so one of my reporters inside Russia that I usually get the price of fuel, the price of a liter of petrol, a liter of diesel, half a kilo of Grechka, butter, eggs, flour, and all the staples. My basket for measuring inflation inside Russia. I didn't get any fuel data, and I'm like, well, why don't you know what the price of a liter of petrol is? They'd sold their car. They no longer bought fuel because they sold their car.
Speechless. So
that is Russian cope right there. You're going to move back to a position which I thought would be one of the last things that they would do would be give up their automobiles, because Russians moved into personal auto ownership from 1991. Absolutely, like they were Americans, right? Like it's written in the Constitution that I have a right to drive. They, that sense of agency and personal freedom, that you can go wherever you want, whenever you want, because fuel's cheap, and I have access to being able to purchase a car now, just went gangbusters in Russia. And so people giving up their cars now voluntarily, because they know it's no longer an economically viable option for them, it is a big step.
that is not the way I thought that story was going to end. I thought that the price was wrong on your sheet that you got, because it was just like infinity. You're like, what do you mean? Oh, we just can't get it. So, but yeah, they had so much trouble getting gasoline for such a while that they're just, well, this thing is useless, hunk of metal now. So let's get rid of it.
Yeah. More importantly, it wasn't outage of gasoline; it was the sustained price of gasoline, which is now cracked 100 rubles per liter in some locations. The price, it's just pricing it out of the market. People do their home budgets and go, I've got to pay this for my mortgage. This is what food is now costing 30% more. Everything that's happening, I can't afford to do everything that I used to want to do. Now gasoline and repairs for motor vehicles are more difficult. I've got to pay my VPN supplier on the side, and it's costing more. Everything is costing drastically more, and that has caused people that would otherwise not give up a car to say, I've got to move back to public transport because I can no longer afford to own a car overall.
That's incredible. anecdotal, of course, but yeah, seems to be the way things are going, and also evidence of that quiet quitting you were talking about, because they're not completely they're not going against the government, but they've removed themselves from that part of the economy now, and it's just not happening anymore. And that's times hundreds of thousands, I'm sure, all over Orkistan. So incredible.
Well, and in the macro reason, the other part of that I think that Ukraine is doing so brilliantly here is they're ignoring the problems in the world. Look at the Anish refinery issue in Ireland. That's now getting some good headway. Mockers will definitely be talking to you today later about how Kaya Kallas is going to take the issue up, and the European Union, the European councillors. Ireland is now at the point where they're pushing it on to the EU Commission or the Parliament in EU to make a decision, and then they'll abide by whatever decision is come up with. And I suggest to you that after a delay, that decision will be that no alumina from they'll ban alumina, but that slow letting the bureaucracy work, it doesn't work for Ukraine oftentimes. And I love how they just ignore problems that are becoming bureaucratic workarounds, like the shadow fleet. I put Beefeater's latest the means by which people get around uh, shadow fleet flagging and insurance and all the things. The deep dive that he's done once again into the shadow fleet and how people shift around to avoid sanctions, even though the Trump administration will put them on, take them off relatively easy. If you look at this system of sanctioning and shadow fleet and how all this goes, you kind of get jack of it, right? And you go, fuck, there's another thing that doesn't work. So Ukraine cuts through and they go, guess what? We're not going to worry about the shadow fleet. We're going to knock out the capability for Russia to export any fuel from the terminals. And, you go, beauty, here, let's do it that way, because the problem with sanctions is, as always, people cheat. People are greedy. The system we live in. What sanctions do is they raise the cost of everything. So long term, they still have great benefit. Sanctions do, but it's kind of, but they don't work effectively enough or fast enough, which is why Ukrainian sanctions are the best sanctions, and I love to see them cut through, because we can see in the loading data that from what's come out from the loading data at each of the terminals, that the process is working. There's a lot of work left to do on each of these terminals. You don't knock out an oil export terminal in one trip, but Ukraine is doing a very good job of reducing the capacity for Russia to generate oil and cutting through the legalese and bullshit, right? If they could find a way to sink alumina tankers or alumina transport cargo ships from Ireland, that they'd I'd applaud that too. But it's not as big a problem as the money to buy everything, because that's why I've always thought it's the key to defeating Russia strategically is sanctions. People cheat, people are greedy, whatever. But if you just don't have the money, if you don't have the euros and dollars to spend on stuff that's got Siemens or Honeywell written on the side of it, eventually you're just not going to be able to get that stuff. So starving them of cash is the best way to deal with Russia, and that's what's happening. And now I'm going to take you can tell us what the story you want to cover is now. And because I'm currently looking at firms, I'm going to go do what I said I'd do yesterday and didn't, and browse through the other refineries that are supposed to still be down. I'm just going to see if a few of them are still cold, Adam. Adam?
Can't hear him.
Just barely. You're
Bottom of the
muffled.
well.
Am I there now?
You're there now.
Hello?
He's halfway up the well.
Oh, he's on the ladder coming up. He's on the ladder coming out of the well.
1, 2. Hello?
Yep. Go ahead, Chief. You're out 5x5.
Okay, sorry, guys. Yeah, I think if the Tate brothers are training with the orc military now, I'm just wondering if they're a valid military target. I think technically, yes. I mean, they've started the training regimen of orc infantry, as you saw with their very terrible arms handling in that video.
So,
And
don't you did you see my video when I was over in Ukraine recently taking the assault rifle training and shotgun training? Did you see those videos, Adam?
oh yes,
Oh, you
absolutely.
did, but nobody else did, right? I didn't publish them on you whatever because I'm not a jerk off like the Tate brothers are. But yeah, notice if I had published these videos and photos, folks, of doing these activities with the trainers we support, you'd see that I'm just doing it in regular civilian clothes, right? But these Tate jerk offs felt like they had to put on military uniforms and they put on plate carriers with no plates in them, of course, but then didn't even button them up properly. They're not even in these things correctly. They talk about your TikTok soldiers, and yeah, their weapons handling is pretty pathetic too.
Well, yeah, and I'm just thinking about it from their perspective. Like if they're now, by Geneva Convention and everything, they're valid military targets, as far as I can tell. I would think that they would want to, as is their nature, to maybe join Akhmat specifically to start some of their own TikTok videos, because nothing says toxic alpha male better than shooting a machine gun, emptying a machine gun into a bush. And it seems very like on brand for them. And they do have that sloped forehead and that kind of Asiatic sort of orky look to them already. So I just think from their perspective, as opposed to just the Tate brothers walking around wherever they're walking around in some country that they can't be extradited from, for their safety, they're not protected. At least if they join Akhmat and um, uh, bend the knee, as it were, to Kadyrov and become scions of his mini sub empire. I think they would at least have the same kind of protection that Adam Kadyrov. I could see this really spinning off well for them. They could do some episodes of. I'm sure that Adam Kadyrov would just fit so well into their bro crew, and they could run around downtown Grozny and in big trucks with lift kits. And anyways, I'm going on and on. I think just for their sake, they should just go ahead and just join up and sign the contract for their own safety and career perspectives.
Yeah. So yeah, they should. And all of these folks. Um, uh, I don't know where these idiots are going to go when they're here. I think they're British, right? Or I don't know if they have any residency in America or whatever. But when they were released from prison in a shonky deal, a dodgy looking deal from Romania, they were flown home on a flown to America on a private jet. I don't know where these assholes have passports. I thought Britain, but if they return to the United States, Candace Owens, these two idiots, everybody who's been over in Russia at the SPIEF, especially given the publicity they put out, and these guys, training, quote unquote, training with the Russian military or whatever they're doing here, ought to get a visit by the FBI over their FARA registration because they're certainly looking like foreign agents that ought to be registered in America.
No, I think they'll probably get a visit from Kash Patel directly themselves, and they'll have to hand him an envelope of cash with the message. No, yeah, and then he'll party with them and they'll all have pictures of them passed out on planes. No, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen in Trump's law enforcement. Yeah, I think they have dual American and British citizenship, but they can't go back to Britain because they have plenty of open human trafficking and rape investigations going on in the UK, and they can't return back to Romania. So basically, it's Miami Beach or Petersburg for those two clowns.
Yeah, so taking a browse through firms today because it's pretty clear. It's a pretty good day to read stuff. um, I don't see when we're talking about refineries being down in Russia, the St. Petersburg refinery, Kirishi, is still showing zero on firms. No hot spots, whatever. The low pressure and high pressure flare aren't even showing up as signals coming out of there. Um, the ammo depot, the ammo depot over by St. Petersburg still generates a hotspot, though. Just if you're interested. Yaroslavl refinery has some flare activity and activity on some of the process heaters on one of the crude units, but that's all. So Yaroslavl looks to be partially back into operation, but none of the other unit operations around there seem to be offering. Rizan looks cold as. But here's the thing. Here's your heads up for later on today, folks. That the factory area over by Rizan is returning northwest of the refinery is returning a large heat signal as if something was hit in the factory area of Rizan. But the refinery at Rizan that took 5 strikes inside of it in the second to last week of May is still cold as nothing going there, nothing showing up at Saratov refinery, no heat signature at all out of the refinery that I can see there, which was previously making a lot of jet fuel for the Engels Air Base across the way and the strategic supply. The strikes there on Saratov look to have been completely successful in shutting in that refinery's dead cold, and Volgograd, it struck most recently about a week ago, but is showing a tiny amount of activity down in its flares at the end of that refinery, but most of the process heaters are cold across the rest of the refinery. So, these strikes that have taken place, this isn't like a couple of days and these things get back into action. I don't see when we estimated that Russia had 40% of its refining capacity offline and that it was starting this serious problem in fuel price hikes, outages, rationing in many regions now in Russia, not just in Crimea. That's because these major refineries have been struck and struck hard enough with multiple strikes that they're still down cold a couple 3 weeks after they've been hit. This is good news, Adam.
Yeah, I think it's great news, and took a while because, like you have been saying before, when they used to do these strikes, it'd be not as many drones, and then only one or two would get through. So we'd always get an awesome video of one or two of these awesome strikes. But now that it's these waves of 20, 30, 100, and also the depleted orc air defense, it makes me wonder if, I don't know if they haven't been fully capable of this kind of scaling before, but it's obviously more effective. And I don't think that the tricks with, I can't remember the name of the cheap diesel byproduct you were saying, but how long
Mazut.
can mazut? That is so orky. Maybe it's not an orc word. It just sounds like one. Mazut.
It is an orc word. If I was to use the chemical terms, it's heavy gas oil or heavy diesel.
Oh, good. Put mazut on my sandwich, Volga.
Yeah, that's all we
Pass
can
the
get.
mazout.
Tonight we have she with mazout. That's all we have on menu. No, okay. It's such an orky word. But how long can they really, like, realistically, these, because those refineries, like you were saying, they operate at a limited capacity. They try to take these shortcuts or produce a slightly different, less refined product, and those places, just whether it's the the massive catastrophe of the strike itself, or they've just hit enough stuff over the last 2 3 years that they can't get replacements, and they can no longer tie the shoestrings together and do these little tricks like serving mazout for lunch,
I
breakfast,
think
and
it's a bit.
dinner.
I think it's a bit of both. We saw the rise in export of heavy gas oil back when the previous round of strikes happened in 2025, starting in August. But this time, as you said, the difference this time is that when the refineries get struck, like Razan in particular is the best example. Razan hadn't been hit for a long time. They finished all the repairs on it. It looked to be back up close to its capacity for processing oil. And then when they struck it, the air defense has been so degraded in Russia that they struck it 5 separate fires on the ground in 5 different locations at the same time. So if you're talking about workarounds inside your refinery, you have to have something to work around too. And if you were, fire fella inside those refineries, 5 fires on the ground inside a refinery at the same time is real nightmare fuel, because what you're trying to do when you're trying to put out one of those refinery fires is you're trying to route things to other areas to keep it away from where the fire's at. But if there are 5 different fires, and some of those fires are affecting process units, and others are affecting the pumping and piping manifolds that connect everything together, you're running out of options. And then oftentimes, if you lose multiple of your process units like that at the same time, those things oftentimes do cogeneration of electricity for you at the same time. And so you start to lose your electric power in the refinery, and then your firefighting apparatus doesn't pump water anymore, and stuff like that. So the cascading problems you can get inside a refinery if you can set multiple fires at the same time is a really big deal, and I think that's what's caused here. That it eliminates both your capacity to produce things like gasoline in the quantity that you wanted, and it eliminates your capability to do workarounds because multiple process units get hit at the same time. And your only answer is you have to shut the whole refinery down until you can get the piping connections put back together, and you can get enough of the refinery unit operations making what they make, so that you can reconfigure it to make as much production of whatever you want to try to make. But when they get back up and running, they do what is typical here, which is if your catalytic reformers aren't running, you've got no place, your hydrocrackers aren't running, and you just don't have the capability to break up these heavy gas oil into very small molecules and then recombine them into other things. You then just have to dump the heavy gas oil on the market, and the people who were reporting oil sales initially tried to get me, all excited. Oh, look, Russia's selling more oil, crude oil. Yeah, they're selling crude oil at a discount. They're selling what should be refined product as a waste product because they can no longer refine it. And I don't see that as a long-term benefit. I actually see that as a downside for Russia, but it's reported, the headline in Reuters was Russia sells more oil this month than last year. Whoop-de-doo. They're selling it for 20% less revenue. So I don't really care. I care about the oil flow, until it turns into cash flow, and then I just want to measure the cash flow.
Yeah. And how often do they report the well shut-ins in Siberia? How do you get that information? And is it like a quarterly report or something, or is there some sort of more active source?
Well, we no longer have access to those sorts of reports directly. We have to, I have to wait until Budanov publishes what they have there, or one of the independent researchers that can get that information out of Russia publishes it. Uh, and you know who I'm speaking to right now. I'm waiting for that report. We don't know the first report and that we got from Budanov, the foreign intelligence, not Budanov anymore. It's a different guy. But the last time we got from the Foreign Intelligence Services of Ukraine, shut-in report from Russia was right after they hit both the Yaroslavl and the Kirishi refineries at the same time. Early May, and um, and that and the perm and the pumping stations that allow them to move West Siberian crude to the west. They could no longer refine it, and they couldn't get it with their pumping stations out to Ust-Luga to export it and Primorsk. So they started shutting in wells, and we had heard that not the largest refiner, but another one, which means to me Lukoil, had shut in 400 wells in West Siberia. Now, they have about 40,000 wells in West Siberia, because that's the way Lukoil had done it. They make a massive pin cushion rather than do a lot of directional drilling because they're orcs, and so they're but they closed in 1% of their wells in the West Siberian crude fields. Which doesn't sound significant maybe to you, but 1% is going to be a big deal long term if they can't get them back up and operating. And that was early on, and we have seen multiple different additional strikes on the capability for Russia to move West Siberian crude around the country and get it out to export locations, including down to Novorossiysk. So I suspect they're probably looking at double that many wells shut in West Siberia. They keep picking away at it, and even the Tumen refinery strike that happened 3 days ago is also affecting West Siberian crude movements, because that Tumen refinery sits on the junction of 3 pipeline areas there, and is also a large user of West Siberian crude. So if they take away the capacity for Russia to manage West Siberian crude inside Russia, their only capability is to export it. And if they can't get it to Ust-Luga, or they can't get it down to Novorossiysk, they have to shut in wells. And so I'm guessing that the next time we hear a reliable estimate of how many wells have been shut in West Siberia, it's probably in the 1,000 or thousands.
I mean, yeah, it has to be that. This can't. It's like you said. It's all about watching that flow, and because the flow is, not extremely down, but lower than it. Anyways, they can't really keep them pumping, right? Like, can they reduce the flow to like very low, or like what is their option for it?
You can partially shut in wells, but cumulative over time, if you don't keep it flowing at its maximum rate, it's going to reach an inertia, and whatever you dialed it down to is going to become its flow rate.
So that's almost as bad. Yeah, it's pretty much shutting it down. You can't get it back up again. I guess it is kind of like a giant siphon. That's quite interesting. Learned so much. That's fascinating. I think it's happening. Do you think it's happening faster than the Ukrainians thought, or just what we thought? Or are we just getting excited because we're seeing just signs, and maybe it won't be as soon as we're hoping?
I suspect that it's having close to precisely the effect that the Ukrainian planners had suspected. It's not as fast enough for me, right? Because I want to see Novorossiysk blow up every night. I want to see Ust-Luga and Primorsk. I mean, I didn't draw all these red circles on this map so that I couldn't get satisfied, Adam, and that's been a month ago. But when I laid out the remainder of the terminals that needed to be hit, that was going for the biggest prize. But Ukraine's done an expert job. I mean, every time you won't go more than a few days before you hear something with an LPDS in it, a linear production and discharge station. The two were struck yesterday, one in northwest Volgograd region and one in southern Voronezh region, which means those LPDS are being struck to keep Russia from being able to reroute its oil. They're just doing a methodical job of picking off everything in order of importance, and occasionally, although I do think it's time for Ukraine to strike Primorsk and Ust-Luga again because of the volumes that they are pushing out there. But Novorossiysk obviously was the next big target. They're doing assessments on what's the likelihood of success of them being able to knock out everything, and they're going for the big prize. As I said before, the big going for the big prize that demonstrates that it's kind of like fuck's no longer given time by going directly after Glushova terminal. That's 1.4 million cubic meters of oil storage there. So these little depots and terminals we're talking about typically, or the depots especially, I'll be talking about in thousands or tens of thousands of capacity for storage of products or crude. This is 1.4 million cubic meters of oil, crude oil storage, and so it's a big prize that you'd love to see go after. But imagine the conversations that they're having inside Chevron right now about their oil profits in relation to the CPC pipeline, because Ukraine is now going after stuff that if it has an effect on a U.S. company, they no longer give a shit.
That's awesome. So Chevron's getting away with that because it's Kazakh oil that's just transporting through the so-called federation. Is that correct?
Yeah, the CPC pipeline is moving almost the vast majority of it. There is some oil, Russian oil, being mixed in there, but the vast majority of it is coming from Kazakhstan, and it's traveling almost its full journey is through Russia, through the CPC pipeline, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, and goes to this massive storage area northeast of Novorossiysk harbor. And then down to the Shakhtaris and Caspian Consortium pipeline export single point mooring out there at the end of that pier. And so, right, this is a million barrels a day of essentially Chevron. Well, Kazakhstan owns a big chunk of it, probably. Just over half, I think, of CPC is owned by Chevron. So when Ukraine attacked the second attack on Novorossiysk harbor, they did damage to the single point mooring, the submerged mooring point of CPC. Not one of the ones that are on the pier that you can see. The ones that you can't see, that where it's a submerged mooring and it comes up through a pipeline and connects out to a vessel that looks to be floating at anchor, but not connected to a pier. It isn't. It's actually doing oil loading through a submerged pipeline and a mooring buoy. So Ukraine incidentally did some damage to the single point mooring of Russia back during the Biden during the Biden administration. And the head of Chevron complained bitterly to Biden about their assets, Ukraine's attacks on U.S. assets inside Russia. and that. So there wasn't. I'm not saying Ukraine listened to him. I'm just saying there wasn't an attack on those assets for quite a while, and I drew a green circle around Grushavaya because I said Ukraine is probably avoiding this tank farm because it would be a significant blow to Chevron, and they've already complained to the U.S. president, and I'm sure that they're in Trump's ear now heavily. Chevron's CEO is probably heavily in Trump's ear about the assets that they're losing now, but who is Trump going to call now? To what sort of leverage does Trump have to tell Ukraine to stop cutting off Russia's cash flow? He's got nothing. Nothing.
He also
At
has
this
no
point.
leverage with the American people for it. Either. I
I
don't
agree.
think.
Yeah, if he tried to go to the American people and say that all poor Chevron's assets are being destroyed over here in Russia, do you think he's going to get a lot of love out of the American population?
Russian collusion is a hoax. It's all a hoax. It's a Democrat hoax. But I just want you to know that I'm very concerned with these strikes on Russian oil.
But not at all concerned about the strikes on American manufacturing in Uzhgorod, right? Which have also happened.
Yeah, Uzhhorod. There have been a few now. Uzhhorod
Been a
was that
few in
first big
multiple
one,
places.
the factory.
Yeah, Russia doesn't give two shits about attacking American assets inside Ukraine.
Neither
So
does
we're
Trump.
supposed to be highly excited about them. Let's face it, folks. Big oil companies don't have a huge supporter base in the population that cry when they take losses. I'm just saying.
And I feel like the smart business move. I don't know. They're smart people. Like they're bazillionaires, and they're the big oil companies. They can hire sharp minds who maybe they're not complaining. Maybe they're just like, well, ho hum, we have to divest. Because if they're smart business people, they should have seen the writing on the wall that we have seen for quite a while. And they can complain all they want, but it's just complaining from someone about your complaining to the world about your bad choices, right? I mean, it's going to hurt their investors. They did a bad job by still doing business in that location and paying transport fees and taxes and whatever else kind of skim off the top that the orcs get for this. They've been paying to kill Ukrainians. So, first of all, screw them. I don't care, which is obviously preaching to the choir here. But second of all, they're being bad businessmen if they're only complaining and they're not changing their paradigm in order to make their investors the most money that they can make. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and the way you're right. They went from we want the most direct route to transport our oil to complaining when that first got struck, but now Chevron appears to be shifting around and trying to find alternative routes for its oil out of Kazakhstan, across the Caspian, and into Turkey, and there are other significant other pipelines now being built, but you obviously can't switch there today. But I think Chevron isn't planning on abandoning its assets in Kazakhstan. I think it's now focusing on better, more reliable transport of its oil out of Kazakhstan through Turkey and other countries. But that takes a while to affect. So yeah, I haven't heard major complaints from Chevron's CEO, but either they're keeping them quiet or they're not complaining to the Trump administration, probably because they'd either get no love there or Trump wouldn't even understand what they were talking about. So they're not. I don't see what we saw before during the Biden administration at all when Chevron assets were affected. We saw them very quickly happen, and we saw Biden administration also formally warn Ukraine about affecting U.S. company assets in Russia, and I don't know, but I suspected that went into Ukraine's planning cycle a little bit. But you cannot actively strike Grushkova oil export terminal, the tank farm up there. You can't attack it twice and cause the damage that they've done and not directly affect Chevron's profits.
I'm not crying about that. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, Chevron spends a lot of money on this equipment, right? But I mean, what's the payback period for that? One of these destroyed refineries or whatever that they own, isn't it going to be within a year or two? And so probably haven't they already paid this off? And so losses are losses, right? You lose these things, and this is force majeure. That comes out of your operating, I guess, but they're not poor. They're not going broke otherwise. It's not endangering them. And as far as I'm concerned, I think most people look at anybody that's working with Russia very dimly right now, unless it's the Trump administration people or something like that. Most people look and they go, "You're helping Russia. We hate you." And I think that's the case. Besides resentment about oil prices, there will be blood. It just strikes me that they haven't lost that much relative to how much they're going to gain, and if they just stick in there with Russia, they're going to get something back. But I'll learn more about how oil wells stop performing. But it seems like they're or that they're building up the, what was it, Chonsky fields up in eastern Siberia. So are they planning a different route now to get the oil out?
You mean is Russia planning a different route?
Yeah. Well, Russia and maybe Chevron too.
Well, Chevron is definitely planning on and working on pipeline routes to the south out of Kazakhstan rather than going north around the Caspian Sea out through Russia. And Russia really can't plan any additional. There's no escape from Russia for Russia. Russia has to transport its oil out of Russia through Russia, and we know where all those locations are being targeted. Chevron has an option, but it's always chosen the easier option before, the most direct route. Now I think they're working on taking a less direct route, but it'll be a less direct, more secure route that isn't going to happen immediately. And because they don't actually own the assets of CPC themselves, right? They're Chevron investors in CPC, but the Russian party who physically controls the pipeline route and all the pumping stations between Kazakhstan and the Novorossiysk oil export terminal. Because Russia owns and has physical control of all that, I guarantee you that Russia has responsibility for maintaining the security of those assets. So Russia, other than cash flow, Chevron probably has a claim against Russia, the Russian party, for failing to meet its commitments to the consortium, and might not be long term losing any money at all. They're losing cash flow, but long term they've probably got a debt that they can recoup from the Russian party.
That's excellent. I'm also wondering if they're suffering from unexpected windfalls that are screwing up their tax margins, their profit margins. So they're like, "Oh, Ukraine blew up that Kazakhstan stuff. Okay, good, because there was no way we can write off this $120 a barrel oil that we're all of a sudden making unexpectedly."
We have no losses to offset against that. We might have to pay some tax. Well, possibly, but I'll tell you where they're not paying any tax. They're not paying any tax in Australia, because we're currently having an argument again about whether or not they should dial up the controls on the mineral resource rent tax system that we have in place for gas. And LNG exported from this country, and I'll tell you what, I'm, even though I worked for the oil and gas industry for 35 years, I am fully in favor of us providing some more tax on Australian oil and gas, because we have been thinking about it completely wrongly for a long time. We've been imagine any Chevron or Santos or Woodside, any of these companies coming to the Australian government now and saying, "Oh, you better not tax us appropriately." So what they did is they set up a thing called a minerals resource rent tax under the Gillard government to get the Australian population to be able to share it appropriately in oil and gas revenues during boom times. So they set up this mechanism of control that in order to get it through, it's like a big machine on tax, but they set all the dials down at almost zero, right, to make it palatable to the oil and gas companies when they first put it in. But what's happened is they've never turned any of the dials up, the settings on the thing, so that the Australians could actually generate any tax revenue from this system, because the foreign companies always say, "Oh no, you can't tax us more for oil, or you can't literally tax us at all for the oil and gas that we're taking out of the ground there," for two reasons. Well, we generate all these jobs. I mean, it's the same thing in the Irish alumina refining. Well, you can't. We provide all these jobs for Australians, and those people pay taxes. So it's kind of like taxing us twice. Is it though? It's kind of bullshit. That's a bullshit argument. And they say, and if you tax
Which
us
means you're
anymore,
letting your employees burden harbor your entire tax burden. If that's what you're going to say as a company, you should be a nice guy and contribute half of the employees' tax burden as cash directly to them.
on their behalf. Yeah. So the oil and gas companies also say, no, if you change, so they set up this tax revenue because they did all the maths when it was put into place. And the only way the Gillard government could get it through was basically set all the dials down to zero, or close to zero. So now they're saying, if you change the tax regime under which we operate, it'll generate a whole bunch of sovereign risk, and no one will want to invest foreign capital in Russia or in Australia, because there's so much sovereign risk. Adam, look around the world right now and see which country presents the highest sovereign risk to you. Is it Russia? Is it one of the countries in the Middle East? Is it
The United
Indonesia? Is it
States?
is it the United States? Does Australia look like a big sovereign risk country for you to operate in right now?
No, and I think that's why also my prime minister is doing so well, cracking on with all these deals that he's getting, because yes, we have higher tax burdens in our little Commonwealth countries with our free health care and our education that's affordable. And I'm so sorry that we were a bad investment before for you, but now we're looking pretty good. And yeah, they can't. Ah. Don't get me started
And
about
it's
this
all
stuff, because I've had generations of it in my own province, right?
yeah.
These heavy oil projects were sold in that way. And what we have now is, yeah, a lot of yahoos moved here and bought huge trucks and lots of ATVs and snowmobiles and the like, and they had a great life for 20, 30 years. And now, because all of those jobs were construction of these projects. And now we have a situation where those construction jobs, industrial oil ones, are gone. Fort McMurray is actually losing population because it takes a lot less people, and they're high paying jobs, but it's like 10 to 1 compared to when it's being built. And so now we have these things that are highly profitable that were brought in because, oh, this is 30 years of investment. We're going to have to put billions in before we see dollar one, and we're going to make a lot of jobs. So the royalties were dialed down. And now they're not dialed back up. And so I have a conservative government that's in the highest oil prices, in history, is running a bigger deficit than the year before, and the year before it was actually illegal for them to run deficits for a while. They had to change their own law back. Oh, I'll stop. Let's go back to Ukraine. But yeah,
No,
it's a
no, but
dirty game.
this is exactly right. The oil and gas companies around the world play the same game, whether it's in the province of Alberta or Edmonton or Ontario. It doesn't matter where they're working, or here in Western Australia. It's the same arguments they present each and every time. But the key to me is go back and look at the basis from which they're deriving wealth. They're deriving wealth from resources that the entire population of the country owns, not simply the people that work on the projects. And these things are called mineral resource rent taxes because that's exactly what they are. Chevron comes to Australia and wants to take our gas out of the ground and mine, everybody, the Commonwealth gas out of the ground and turn it into LNG and sell it. They have a right to make a fair profit and a return on their investment. But the truth is, when they invest in something, they have an internal rate of return of something like 7%. Well, the minerals resource rent tax doesn't kick in and start paying any real money to the Australian population that actually owns the resource until they've recouped their profit, and that it goes up another percentage or two above that. But we don't turn the dials up. We did exactly what you said. They turn all the dials down on taxation and royalties while they build the projects. And then when the projects get running, there's no more construction jobs. And you've built a big machine that runs with almost zero people and is meant to get running and stay running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that it makes as much profit as fast as possible for the company that's operating it. But at the end of the day, they're using our resource. It's not their oil and gas. They talk about it like it's theirs because they've been written a permit to do that activity for a while. But it really shits me when these big oil and gas companies cry poor and do things that are phenomenally irresponsible and say, well, you can't do anything about it to us because, like in the Irish alumina refinery, well, we built a big power plant that provides electrical power to us, but it also provides some to the community. If you make us stop doing that, if you make us stop selling alumina to Russia, we'll shut down. Will they though? Here I long for the day when regulators and population just regularly say, will you though? That's bullshit. I mean, I'm really enjoying this examination of the Rusal alumina facility because it encapsulates so many of these lies and bullshit that big companies and evil bastards like Russia try to tell you in the world that just doesn't turn out to be true if you take a little bit of expertise and you take a little bit of time to examine these issues fully. You'll see that Rusal has no business selling. Russia moved into all these areas that it has expertise in mining and managing, solid mineral reserves and oil and gas, and they try to get everywhere. They've milked their way into all parts of the world. I was asked to go work on a Lukoil project in Mexico, and I said no. But they have infiltrated everywhere in the world and set themselves up as rent seekers, essentially in those locations. Like any, I'm not saying it's pejorative, but a rent seeker in the resource industry, companies are valid rent seekers when they're in those positions, but that doesn't mean because they're so big that they have right to hold sway over what's happening here, like in August. You see it. You see it in the interviews with the counselors, the local counselors that have been so bowled over and swayed to the Russian position that, but the jobs, you got to worry about the jobs, worry about the power they're supplying, worry about the taxation. Folks, Rusal's paying fuck all in tax in Ireland. They're paying nothing in tax. Chevron paying nothing in tax in Australia. These folks are robbing us blind from our resources, and because they've been allowed to inveigle themselves into things like power supply and taxation and job security that they think they can get away with everything. And I'm here to tell you that they shouldn't be allowed to do that. Every time anybody cries sovereign risk in Australia, oh, well, we won't come and develop your mineral resources. Fine, fine. Leave them in the ground. Leave that oil and gas and bauxite and leave everything in the ground in Australia. I guarantee you someone will be along that will want to develop that stuff later at more overall value to us. Call their bluff on sovereign risk. Call their bluff on jobs and employment and taxation and power supply in Ireland. That alumina is going to readily be sold into an expanding market in Europe. You'll sell it all for the price it is now or better, and you can extract the Russian influence from your country and your local councils even. You know, the sway this company has over the local councils there, I find to be phenomenally disturbing for Ireland as a sovereignty issue for Ireland because the Russians are there, not because they're going to lose investment there. They ought to nationalize that alumina refinery, nationalize it, maintain all the jobs, kick the Russians out, give them fair market value price for the assets as and when they're sold. You know, don't do it the way the Russians would do. Do it the way that's fair and reasonable in European Union, and I guarantee you, you will face no sovereign risk threat at all from responsible companies that want to come move in. Do the right thing, and you are not going to be punished by being seen as a bad place to invest your money. Where are people going to go? Are they going to go to Russia? Is anybody going to invest in Russia in the next 2 generations that has a brain in their head? No, they're not. Because real sovereign risk is when a country like Russia nationalizes your assets because they're running out of money or they want what you've got to be able to produce fully for them. Look at the oil and gas assets that Russia has nationalized. All the best, newest, nicest stuff in the world they've nationalized because the old, decrepit, crappy stuff that they've got isn't worth a shit, and they want all the brand new, shiny stuff that was built by the foreign companies that have been in there, and they've taken it over, and now they're running that into the ground. But and they paid those companies a tiniest fraction of what those assets were valuable to them. They didn't pay Shell fair market value for Sakhalin 2, which is why Chevron or Shell refused to accept it. If you accept the money from Russia, you're accepting the logic behind the nationalization and their mathematics in how they got to coming up with the value. That you know, Shell just said, not taking that. We'll see you in court. When? Who knows when? Maybe never. But eventually, when Russia's beaten here and the foreign companies all make claims in the international sphere for what Russia's done to them, then Russia's going to have some serious sovereign risk. But if Agish refinery is taken over by Ireland, nationalized, the jobs are maintained, the sales will be maintained, and any punishment that they would get from the world courts or anybody who is looking in from the outside and say, gee, I don't know if I want to go invest in Ireland. Look at what they did to that Russian company. If they look into it in detail, they'll go, yeah, you know, Rusal got fair market value for what was nationalized. It was nationalized for a good reason because Ireland's part of Europe and Russia's at war with Europe. Nobody's going to say, oh, gee, I don't want to invest in Ireland because they nationalized Rusal. They'll say, good. They nationalized Rusal. Let's go get the nickel refiner out of Finland, and let's go get let's get every Russian investment out of Europe by nationalizing all of them. Treat Russia in a reciprocal manner that they're talking about treating you, but do it on a fair and equitable basis that's provided for under EU law, and you will suffer no adverse long-term effects. I guarantee it. Dry fly.
The reason Shell's pitch was so smart was that it does force the Russians to address the issue in court. They have a system where they nationalize a company cheap. They then run it a while, then they privatize it for a profit, and then they nationalize it again a couple decades later, and it's rinse repeat. But if the company refuses to acknowledge that they took compensation, it makes it almost impossible for Russia to privatize it again to anyone outside of the country, because they will
Because it's
be
still got an open lien on it, doesn't it?
they got a lien on it, and that's exactly what you're seeing in Venezuela right now, where you have companies, a bunch of companies that have been nationalized, sometimes 2 or 3 times, and they're just done with that cycle. And Trump is trying to force them to accept the agreement so that they can get money back in there and reprivatize it. But they're just not having any of it. And Shell did exactly the right thing. If I were their lawyers, I would have absolutely 100% told them the same thing. You're not going to get any money for it. It's not worth it. Just leave it on the books and force them to address it in the future. It also takes that asset off the market. And if Shell is competing with them in other markets, it helps them maintain their price, because what happens when Russia comes online, they tend to really, really depress the pricing initially to try to be able to skim it for their oligarchs that own it. So yeah, Shell did it right, and yes, you're correct that doesn't have to be done that way. Ireland could do it the correct way. You nationalize it, give them a fair price, and then operate the company. Option B is you just constrain, you just take them under regulation. Deripaska and whoever it is who had it can still own it, as far as but it's run by the EU and the Irish government. Basically, it's under almost like bankruptcy.
Change out the board and make it
Yeah,
a
yeah,
government
yeah.
appointed board, but he can still be the beneficial owner of the shares.
Yeah, yeah, and he'll still get paid, he'll still get dividends, he'll get all the stuff he used to get. I mean, you can even put it in a fund if you want to, put it in a fund for him until all the liabilities are cleared up. That's a possibility too. But there are just a lot of ways you can do it and do it cleanly. They just have to decide. The problem with Ireland is that a lot of the government that not a lot of it, but some of the people in government have close ties to Sinn Féin, which was the old IRA group. And people don't realize how deep the Russians got into the IRA back in the 1980s. I mean, the whole operation that Putin was running out of Dresden with the Red Army faction, there was a parallel uh, line of contact and funding that went into the IRA. There was a parallel group that went into the PLO. The Russians were into all of these revolutionary organizations, not running them per se as like from the Politburo, but funding them in coordinating and cooperating. And so there's a whole lot of people you can almost bet for sure that have old contacts and or legacy with the Russians, and they just look at them very differently than say people in the UK would, or in Scandinavia, or Eastern Europe that were oppressed. It's very similar to the kind of thing you see coming out of the AfD in Germany. Different end of the political spectrum, but the same problem. There's a Russian legacy that goes back 40 years to when the USSR ran agents all over these revolutionary groups. Listen.
And that's the myth of neutrality a little bit, in that Ireland and Switzerland, I applaud them wanting to remain militarily neutral in politics across several generations, but the problem is the infiltration of folks like Rusal into India. Or look at all of the money that's being moved and the dodgy deals. Switzerland is a hotbed for, as is Austria, who tries to maintain their level of neutrality, not being in NATO and that. These places become hives of Russian influence because they know that your weakness of wanting to remain neutral means that you'll err on the side of not exposing things rather than err on the side of saying, yeah, I've got a problem with this here. If push came to shove, there are people in Ireland in the government and local councils and everything that would know that Russia has been not just maintaining but vastly expanding its export of material to St. Petersburg, to Russia. You know, a lot of people would know. Everybody who works in the loading docks in that refinery would have noted over the past several years, and they'd told some people, that, you know, pretty much all we're doing is servicing Russian ships here these days. And if that doesn't make you go, you know, as a government, it's because you know you're making lots and lots of money off of it, and you want to maintain your neutrality. So you don't want to point out that Russia's doing shitty things here, because that would kind of be taking a side, right? If you will. I think that's this is the problem of neutrality. Not picking a side in things like the Ukrainian defense of its country from Russia. Not picking a side there kind of is picking a side, Adam.
Can I jump in there for a minute too? Because I want to say that it's worse than that, Will, because Sinn Féin, like the Red Army faction, actually had a lot of ties to the KGB back in the 80s. I mean, the trouble during the Troubles, it was absolutely, there was a money stream. Now, I'm not saying all of the IRA was funded by the Russians. It wasn't. All of the PLO wasn't funded by the Russians. It wasn't. But the Russians absolutely were putting money in and giving assistance, and some of those connections are still there, just like they are in the Palestinian movements. I'm not opposed to the Irish Republicans wanting independent Republican Ireland. I get it. I'm not opposed to Palestinians wanting their own destiny. I get it. I even understand the leftists in Europe who want to have a political voice. I get it. But that doesn't excuse the fact that the KGB was absolutely into those organizations extremely deeply, as deeply as they were into the ones in South America. And it's something that has legacy issues to this day. And it would be beneficial if people at least reflected on this and understood it. In other parts of the world, like Argentina and Brazil and parts of the Andean world, they actually have had reconciliation tribunals. They've had that in Eastern Europe in places where they recognize that, yeah, bad shit happened and we're going to clean house. But there's a lot of places in the West where we haven't done that, where it was absolutely infiltrated. And to a great extent, the Russians are still there. Hell, they're in Brighton Beach. They're in Sunny Isles. You know, Brighton Beach, New York, Sunny Isles, Florida. They're still here. And people need to understand that it's not just neutrality, it's not just making a buck, that there actually has been political influence and, if not outright infiltration, into a number of our political and economic structures. And until we recognize that, these kind of things are going to continue. And I'll listen.
Yeah, and the absurdity of things like whether you're talking business deals or the fact that there have been 600,000 Schengen visas issued to Russians in the last year. You know, Beefy's analysis too. I should pop that up there. That you know, these folks recognize you as the enemy. They regularly spout that you're the enemy. If you're in Europe or America or Australia, their government has listed us as unfriendly countries. So why do they continue to send 600,000 people to the EU freely and easily without when you're considered unfriendly, and they're continually talking about nuking one or the other of you? It's beyond belief that this has continued to exist, but it's just because there's some money in it for us. But I'll tell you what, 600,000 visitors from Russia to the EU over the last year, there's quite a lot of nefarious activity going on in those 600,000, and that number should be significantly and drastically reduced. Also, here in Australia, I uh, I am continued to be astounded by how many Russian visitors we have to this country, even during a period when they've named us an unfriendly country, and we're supposed to be fully in support of Ukraine. I continually run into as many Russians as I do Ukrainians in my travels in West Australia, and I find it very problematic. And then I do things like generate uncomfortable, awkward situations with them, which is fun for me. Sure, it's fun for me, but I don't think it's good for the overall system. Adam?
Whoa, almost dropped my phone. Yeah, I don't think it's the essential fallacy of that argument is it's funny because it's horseshoe theory proof to me too, because it's the essential fallacy of of uh, of MAGA's argument too. Oh, Russia's the bastion of family values, so we don't. So they're not our enemies, and so yeah, if you turn your back on a guy with a knife, you're going to get stabbed. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, good point about Beefy's article. I thought that was really telling. What a mix of things in terms of accepting people who are potentially dangerous. I think that's a good goal for another sanction round, although it's very anti-EU to do that. But I really wanted to say that the enemies that are up close or felt to be up close, sometimes it's like a little hill. You're at the bottom of the hill, you can't see the mountain behind it. And I think that's the case with Russia, is that maybe you've met some Russians and they've been nice to you, or something like that in America, but you can't see it. And what you see are these immigrants, because immigrants who are coming from other countries that maybe they're brown, maybe, and that's all it takes. And then the news is constantly, Fox especially, is just pointing at that problem without pointing at the Russians. Nobody in the United States points out that we have a real problem with Russian influence. Of course, it's just a hoax. But anyway, so you guys, you're doing good. Keep going.
Well, we're doing good overtime now, but I'll hang around. We'll talk as long as Adam's up late, so I'm happy to go until he can. I think Jane wants to talk to us though, but she doesn't know how to put her hand up. Jane.
Hi. Yeah, they did an Android update. And I seem to have lost the ability to put my hand up. I have to go and figure that out. Have you had a bit of a chat talking about Deripaska? Have you had a little bit of a chat about what happened here in Australia with Queensland Alumina and Rio Tinto and Rusal? It's not quite.
We have not.
It's not quite the same as what's happening with Ohanish in Ireland, but for our non-Australian listeners, in Queensland we do have a alumina or aluminium or bauxite, is what we would.
We're producing bauxite, not aluminium.
We're producing bauxite. Yeah. Anyway, big project in Queensland, and it's 80%. Well, it was. It's called Queensland Alumina, and it's 80% owned by Rio Tinto and 20% Rusal. And obviously, in 2022, the Australian government sanctioned Oleg Deripaska, and so we didn't technically ban the export of alumina, but we banned Deripaska, and that caused problems for that joint venture under Australian law. And so obviously Deripaska was very unhappy because Rusal, being the 20% in the JV, they then took some of the output, and we know where that output went. It went to Russia. So by sanctioning Deripaska, that put that joint venture in quite a difficult position. And so they sued the Australian government, saying that the sanctions, I don't know what exactly their legal argument was, but the Australian courts basically said, sorry, we can't do this. Is this is a sanction put in place by the Australian government. The sanction is legal, therefore they threw out the case, basically. So then the ultimate impact of that was that Rio Tinto then took over the remaining 20% of the JV and are now running Queensland Alumina. Essentially, it's 100%. And none of that output is going anywhere near Russia.
Right, because the output of the once that happened, Australia did sanction any export of alumina to Russia.
Yeah. So it wasn't, the majority of the output was not going to Russia in the first place, but some of it definitely was. So that's how the Australian government managed to do it in the beginning anyway, at least by sanctioning Deripaska. Now, obviously, Rusal was not very happy about that. And they lost the case here in Australia, but they have sued Rio Tinto actually in Russia late last year. And of course, the Russian courts ruled in favour of Rio Tinto, naturally.
Does Rusal own, or does Rio Tinto own any remaining assets in Russia that Rusal could attach as part of that judgment?
I don't know, actually. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think. I'm not familiar with any Rio Tinto assets in Russia. They hadn't expanded there. They tend to go to some of the same places that Russia tries to go.
Yeah. So it's not quite the same as what's happening in Ireland, because I believe the Ohanish refinery, I think it's 100% Rusal, isn't it? It's not a JV or anything like that. So it was a little different here in Australia, but it's probably one of the good things that the government did back then was to prevent, in order to prevent that export to Russia. But I
agree. Look, I tear, as you well know, Jane, I tear a lot of strips off the Australian government, previous and now in how we're managing our support for Ukraine in this war. But that case, I find no fault with at all. Even in the oil area, I find fault with the manner in which they're implementing it. But the attempts to try to join in the sanctions regime against Russia have been good, but you got to look at things not just on the surface, but in deep. And I really applaud that effort, because by sanctioning Deripaska personally, then he can't derive any benefit from companies he owns, and then that attaches problems to the companies. So the companies then have to exit, and they may be shitty about it, but they're not going to win in court overall.
No, and it was an interesting case here because this is really just an Australian thing, but the lawyers and that represented Deripaska, it was Christian Porter who was who had literally just finished being our attorney general.
Well, he's representing a lot of really disgusting characters these days.
It was such a joke, but yeah. Anyway, so it's not. Well, I guess to talk about this, it's there are ways that you can do these things if the government is willing.
Exactly. Box clever, and you can have a lot more effect than going in half cocked.
Yeah. So I don't really know what the Irish government might consider doing, but we didn't have to nationalise it here because Rio Tinto was an 80% part of the JV, so we didn't have to nationalise them. So yeah, a bit different for Ireland, but it just goes to show that frickin' Deripaska, man, he's got fingers in pies everywhere. He really does.
That's how they try to diversify themselves so they can limit their exposure to being an oligarch in just Russia, right? We were talking about Roman Abramovich yesterday, and how you know how he was able to be the between Moscow and Ukraine, but that he's not subject to the same downsides inside Russia because he has successfully expatriated enough of his assets that he can live comfortably in Israel or Spain or whatever, and still he doesn't have anything to be taken away from him inside Russia, other than if he enters Russia, his his freedom can be taken away. But that's why he's a good go between for Putin to go try to have conversations with Zelensky. But uh, but I wouldn't, I share problems with Abramovich. But yeah, that's what Deripaska has been trying to do for years and years: build up assets in America and Ireland and Australia, so that he can have a bolt hole to go to when he no longer when he no longer sees the capability of living in Russia. But currently, he's still got too much of his riches in Russia that he is. But he's a bad character everywhere. I've been sitting next to Adam for too long. The Banderite is worn off on me, and I basically hate Russians everywhere they are in the world,
Why is he
unless
rich?
unless
Why is he
those
rich?
Russian.
Did he invent things?
No,
No,
Abramovich
what
is
did he do? No,
interesting.
he was in the right place, had the right daddy in
Yeah.
1991 during the fall, and he, in a very corrupt manner, became an oligarch by killing and stealing and financially raping his own people and country. So yeah, zero. How 100% Banderite. Heads on pikes. Where did their money come from?
I think Abramovich is still fighting about the Chelsea money because it's stuck in
he's
in the
fighting.
UK courts. Yeah, he
He's
has.
fighting, but really, some court
Mm,
in Britain or the EU ought to reach down and grab some sack and just take it all off of him and hand it over and go, big deal,
yeah,
sue me. I mean,
yeah.
I'm in favor, as Adam would be. As I say, it's rubbed. I literally think we ought to nationalize or find the way to sanction and remove Russian influence from our countries everywhere in the world. They've named us as enemies. Let's treat them reciprocally as enemies. You're not allowed to own any assets in my country. We're going to either nationalize it or take it off of you by sanctioning you and not allowing you to derive benefit, whatever. Ireland ought to do it. Spain ought to do it. All of European countries ought to do it. Britain ought to aggressively go after Abramovich's assets in a way that they could adjudicate fully in Britain. They're not going to face any sovereign risk as a result of it. You just aren't. I'm telling you, we could expel all Russian influence from every liberal democracy, put those assholes back in their box, make them live with themselves, and we would suffer no long-term economic detriment from it. I guarantee it. They have inveigled themselves everywhere in the world, but they are not an essential element of society or economics anywhere in the world. They're nothing. They're a nothing power. They're a nothing military power, and they add nothing to any place that they've been, except where they have fully said, I'm no longer Russian, I'm Australian, I'm American, or whatever, where they're willing to um, assimilate into the society they've moved to and accept that it's just better than being from Russia. I'm happy that then they add to society. But if they're any of these Russians who are living in America, Australia, Britain, wherever they're living, and if you've run across them, that they talk like they're from, well, they love living off the largesse of wherever they're at, but they always still consider themselves Russian. Then they ought to go back to Russia.
Yeah, did they replace the Russian ambassador here in Australia yet? Because they sent back Alexei, we drove him insane.
I don't think I think they've got a temporary placeholder
Yeah,
to answer calls, but they haven't replaced their ambassador here.
yeah. We'll have to drive out the next one if they.
The Yanks finally did, though, and he's a real winner. But we won't go to that subject matter. Adam,
Oh gosh.
We're
Yeah.
about to replace our, like, it's very close. Our ambassador from the United States to Canada is a clown, and he retweets the 51st state stuff. And then there's that guy, another MAGA diplomat, I saw a tweet about, and it was part of it was a picture of him basically pretending to be a local football fan in whichever Northern European country. No, sorry, Denmark, because of Greenland.
Yeah,
So
it was Denmark where he wanted to go out, but
yeah,
he had to go incognito.
and he just put on dark sunglasses and the local team stuff. He spent like $500 on all the local team swag, and got caught like trying to go out into public as a MAGA diplomat into a reasonable country. And yeah, our guy's a clown. I'm sure he has security. He fucking should.
Has who's the Canadian ambassador to America? They should take that Toronto mayor and make him the ambassador to America.
Yeah, the Toronto mayor died. The current premier of that province, which is the largest and most populous province in Canada, Ontario. It's where Toronto, Sudbury, Ottawa all exist inside of. He is surprised. It's funny when these things happen, when your little like left right paradigm of your little nation's politics comes up against an existential threat such as MAGA, right? Or just populism in general. And, you know, that guy is more popular than ever outside of his province. And he's still not very popular in his province. But other Canadians outside of Ontario who would politically usually be like, oh, that guy's crazy, his brother was a crackhead, they're just like loudmouths. Well,
You
now
can't
that you're
say
being a
stuff like
loudmouth witness,
that.
those little local rivalries and political differences just disappear when you've got sorry to say, but like a former betraying friend down south. I love you guys, especially you, James, and I know it's not you, but damn it, this
So
51st state stuff.
we've got one last little antidote before I'll disappear about the American ambassadors and stuff here is like during Trump when he was doing all the tariffs and stuff last year, you know, there was consternation in Australia because the Australians made a concession around beef. And we really have never imported very much beef into Australia because we have plenty here. And we view it as a better quality. Anyway, the Australian government made a concession on US beef. Anyway, since the sanctions were put in place, I think someone did the stats and put them on Twitter actually and said how we've imported 200 kilograms of US beef, which is approximately one cow. And we actually think it was probably the US Embassy in Canberra who imported it. So fuck Trump, frankly. And now you've got screwworm in your beef in Texas. And I grew up on a cattle place in Australia. I'd never heard of freaking screwworm. So your beef is probably going to get sanctioned again.
Yeah, it'll be banned again for sure.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
So we have in Canada, for obvious reasons, a ton of American brands like Doritos, all that stuff. But since all the tariff clownery has started, and Trump actually complains about American booze not being allowed in Canada, it's not outlawed. People just are not buying it. Just like I choose to not buy American liquor at all anymore. And so there's all these products in the grocery store. I'm looking at a Doritos bag right now that says made in Canada, right? It's this big American company. It's Procter and Gamble probably owns it in the end, but they've all got little maple leaves all over their things. But our local stuff has just been selling through the roof, and like, so you walk down the shelves and it's almost like half of COVID because all of the Canadian stuff is picked over, and there's just like full shelves of your Doritos and chocolate bars and Kraft Dinner and all the like.
Craft
Fantastic.
dinner. I love the name of that.
Anyway, thanks, Will. I'll go now.
Yep. Thanks, Jane. So let's see. It's 10:41, so we won't cover all the other stuff that I wanted to talk about, but I'll just quickly highlight the fact that there's been another strike on the Chonhar Bridge overnight at the crossing there. So it shows some elevated activity of Ukraine looking to try to attempt to isolate Crimea from the mainland, and with the weakened capability of the Crimean bridge to handle traffic and the strikes on roll-on, roll-off ferries and everything, and the strikes on oil storage and fuel product storage there, it just looks like they're continuing to strike and try to isolate the capability for Russia to support their activities in Crimea, which is great. Carry on, please. There has been because there was so much activity in St. Petersburg recently at the naval base and the fuel depot during the fuel import terminal at St. Petersburg during the SPIEF, that apparently a sympathetic arsenal factory that produces military products for missiles and artillery systems has exploded. No indication that a drone or an attack was made there. I think it's just wants to get in on the action. So there's a military factory in St. Petersburg on fire overnight, the Arsenal factory. I wonder what they make with a name like that. So that's good news.
I
We
heard it
talked
was
about.
famous as the original home of the AK manufacturing, but they've obviously expanded since then.
Yeah, that might be it. That might be where Kalishnikov first set up his activity. I don't really know. I remember going to an old factory in around the arsenal in the old arsenal in St. Petersburg, but it was just a military and a museum type thing. It wasn't currently operating. But you're right. It very well could be that. I'll also note that we'll get into more detail, and I'll put some red circles on a map for you. That Dallas Analytics. I met one of these guys in Kiev when I was there. I hope to get Dallas on and talk to us incognito. Dallas Analytics, if you're not following them, you should. They're a very good group of folks in, I'll say, various different employment categories in Ukraine, in Kiev, and areas that I won't even tell you exactly. Well, I'm not allowed to name them, and I won't tell you exactly what they do. But I did have some meetings with them. They are bona fide. When Dallas Analytics says that they've got some information from Russia, you can definitely. They're like Atesh. Their information is solid. It's proven to be verifiable, and they could potentially put themselves at risk if they were to expose who they all are by getting the information that they got. That they've published a recent report now that you can look at if you'd like to, on the fact that Russia is going to attempt to significantly expand their manufacture of Mi-8 helicopters at the Kazan helicopter factory, which I'm currently looking at on a map or on satellite photographs, and picking out places that might be hit. The Mi-8 helicopters are a very useful platform for Russia to both do air assaults with, and I don't suspect they're going to be doing much of that with the untrained state of their air assault forces, but they also use them for electronic warfare and weapons platforms. So expansion of those. Scheduled to manufacture 72 Mi-8 helicopters in the 2026-2027 under their current defense order. I'm not sure if they can make that estimate because they make about 35, I think, now a year. I'm not sure they have the capability to expand to the full 72, but that's the order they've been given. And Dallas has some more information in that report about how they're going to go about doing that and where they have dependence on external European and other manufacturers for componentry to make those helicopters. So it's worth a read if you want to have a look at, I guess, a potential threat of Russia expanding a military capability. That factory is on the north side of Kazan City and is easily targetable if Ukraine decided to smash either the machine shops, the assembly areas, the warehouses. They're all relatively easily identifiable, as well as the finished product and export area, which is regularly full of helicopters. So if that becomes a concern to Russia, to Ukraine, expect some excitement inside the north part of the city of Kazan. Adam, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today that we've missed as a big subject? I'm happy to hang around, but I note that we're moving into what should be your probably bedtime.
Yeah, getting close there. No, I'm pretty good. This was an excellent conversation. I learned a lot. I hope Brian's waving. He had his hand up before, but then it went down. But what do you got to say, Brian?
What's up, homies? Good to see you guys on here. I'll definitely listen to the recording. I've been kind of tied up with other things this evening.
You've probably been over listening to David and Letters from Ukraine.
No, I have not.
You've been in a competing space, haven't you? I can smell it.
I'm not a two-timer. No, I'm not a love and leave him sort of guy. No. So, a couple of questions. So, do you anticipate a Kherson-style retreat in the coming months? And if so, where would you expect it to happen?
I expect to see either more of what they've done with the 337th in Kherson, abandoning the spit there. I don't think it'll look like Kherson though. I don't think that they will be a drastic, rapid, voluntary, what do they call it, goodwill gesture. I think the lines will just start thinning, and they'll get lots of refusals, and eventually Ukraine will start poking into places and find out that nobody's home.
Gotcha. So it's just sort of like gradual disengagement, and then Ukrainians advance, and then there's no one there. Gotcha. Okay, and then would you agree that the peninsula is effectively closed at this point? Do you think it's that locked down that it's the clock's ticking on the Crimean Peninsula when it comes to food and other supplies and certainly military supplies? I mean, they're kind of shut down, aren't they? With this bridge, between the bridge and what's going on with the other bridge, the Kerch Bridge, and then the M14. Are they stuck, or am I oversimplifying it and being too optimistic?
No, I don't think you're over egging it. If you look at the strikes on the Chonhar Bridge, especially if there are then attacks on the Armyansk area for the causeway that goes the other causeway that goes into Kherson from Crimea, that the Kerch Bridge is heavily degraded. They're not moving any significant rail traffic across it. They are moving passenger vehicle traffic across it, but it has been significantly degraded in its capability. We don't see the capability of Russia moving any fuel into Crimea in any great amount. They're reduced now to coastal tankers that are coming into Feodosia, and with the additional tax on Feodosia, they're probably loading the local pipeline system right from the ships would be the only thing I can think of. But Ukraine is now going through and methodically ticking off all of the depots that are capable of holding that fuel in Crimea, and that they're going to be basically reduced in overall capacity there to the point where it'll affect fuel transfer will affect everything, right? It's going to affect food transport, ammunition transport, everything, beans, butter, bullets, water, everything is being restricted in Crimea. They are absolutely definitely reducing the viability of Russia holding Crimea and using it for any beneficial military role that Russia wants it to hold. And the Russians believe, now this isn't me believing it, but the Russians are believing that it's just a matter of time here, that if they are able to isolate Chonhar and Armyansk crossings to the north into Crimea, that'll be the time when Russia will lift traffic on the Kerch Bridge, and then that Ukraine's ready to drop that bridge at that time. That's what Russians are saying. I'm not sure if that's the way it's progressing. I see Crimea falling the way that I see a lot of Kherson falling, which is just gradual abandonment because they won't have anything to fight with. They won't have any food. They won't have any bullets. They won't have any fuel. It's just going to become untenable for Russia, and that they'll quietly abandon it rather than Ukraine having to take it back by force. But we'll see. Ben Hodges, I'm not going to argue with Ben Hodges. Ben Hodges believes that taking back Crimea is essential to finishing this war, and that I think he believes that Ukraine will eventually land some troops someplace to help Russia recognize that they need to move toward the exits. But as a shaping operation, what they're doing now, cutting them off of all the resources, it's obvious. It's as obvious to me as it is to you, Brian, on what's going on. And fuel shortages, coupon rationing of food stuff, sales, it's undeniable that things are going on there. And what's also undeniable is that Peskov and the Kremlin are lying about it. So it's definitely happening. Terry,
for one, like on a personal level, sorry, Terry, on a personal level, I'm hoping for home front collapse before battlefront collapse. It'll be more fun. But I'm a Banderite. Go ahead, Terry.
Cheers, Adam. And it's been a great evening listening to the two of you. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I think is an additional bonus with this fuel shortage, I think it's going to be the civilians, the Russian civilians, who try to abandon Crimea first, if they've still got cars or they can get out or whatever. And obviously the military is going to have to stay for longer. But with this fuel shortage, one of the things they won't be able to do is to load up big vans with all of their belongings to get out. They're just going to have to go with the bare minimum. So they can't go stealing everything like they have done in other places, and they've gone off with all of Crimea's stuff. But also, when it does come down to the military trying to get out, if there's also still a fuel shortage, they won't be able to take all of their gear with them. They're just going to have to get out the best way they can. They might have the odd ship that they can all jump onto. There might be a few planes that could come and get them out. But again, they're not going to be able to take all of their artillery, all of their equipment, all of their radars, all of their whatevers. And I do think that eventually, I think it's going to be fairly slow by our terms. But somebody said earlier on here, trust the AFU to know what they're doing. I really, really do. I think the bridge isn't going to be blown until most of the civilians have gone and it's just the army or the Russian forces, yes, cat, that are trying to get out. But it has occurred to me that this shortage of fuel means that they're just not going to be able to take all of the big stuff with them when they go to. What do you reckon, Will?
I think that's exactly right. I think if they are able to isolate the two entry points and keep fire control over the highway from Zhankoy up through Mariupol, that Russia won't be able to evacuate much that direction because they won't have fuel to move it all that distance. And if they try to get much heavy equipment back across the Kerch Bridge, it'll probably collapse under the weight. And they only have 2 of the 10 landing ships that are still in existence in the Black Sea Fleet, from my records here, that could carry anything away. And that only, sure, it carries, I don't know, whatever it is, 8, 10 tanks at a time or whatever, but trying to move much heavy equipment out of there with 2 landing ships that remain out of that fleet is going to be a losing proposition. So yeah, they'll probably end up having to abandon Crimea with very little of the equipment that they've moved in there at the end of the day, and lovely.
Yeah, and I think
Dry
it'll have a
oh.
it'll have a side effect of getting all the Katsaps out. The people who have been there the whole time, the Ukrainians who have survived this 12 years now of occupation, aren't going to leave because of a little gas crisis. They're the ones who are going to stay, and all those jerks who bought cheap apartments are going to be the ones who are going to leave. Go ahead, Dryfly.
Well, I'm going to be the counterpoint or the naysayer. I don't think, as long as Putin lives, he's not going to let them abandon Crimea, and he's going to actually, I think, make it difficult even for civilians to leave. They're going to self-deport. Now, if Putin dies, that'll change everything. But I really firmly believe that that Putin is going to he's no steps backward. The order is going to be no step backwards, and because the bridge is kind of constrain the escape. I mean, you can't just go walk off across the field and through the tree line like you can in Donbass. I think the Russian forces are going to be stuck there until they either surrender or die. I mean, it could very well be a situation where they either surrender or die in place, just because Putin isn't going to allow them to. He is just going to say, no, you do not leave. And as long as he's alive, and or somebody like him, part of the Siloviki that's really bought into this thing, I think Crimea is going to be the last place to empty out. I've heard what Hodges says. I get it. And I think that's why it's so important that Ukrainians decide that Crimea is going to be returned, because it's going to take that kind of a shocking defeat to get them to actually collapse the social structure.
But so don't you believe, though, that as things degrade inside Russia and voices become more and more negative about the prospects of the special military operation, Putin giving an open order, a direct order to die in place rather than give up Crimea, could actually be the kind of black swan event that causes him to be toppled?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. But if the people who topple him are Siloviki, they're just going to try to, quote, be more effective. But my personal opinion is that, I mean, I agree with everything you guys are saying, that's ultimately going to happen. But I do not expect them to retreat from that point. They're going to give up a lot of other places before they give up Crimea. Crimea and places like Luhansk and Donetsk, the city of Donetsk, the city of Luhansk, the coast, the Azov coast, and Crimea are going to be the last places they give up. They will give up Zaporizhia. They will give up parts around Kharkiv. They will do that. Shit, they may give up Kursk and Belgorod before they give up those areas. They've paid too much for it. But that's not going to stop. That's not going to stop that's not going to stop the situation. That doesn't change it. Just because what they want something doesn't mean they're going to get it. I mean, if wishes were fishes, we'd all cast nets. It's they're going to be screwed. But I think people just need to brace themselves for the struggle that's going to be Crimea, and why the Ukrainians know that has to be done. That if Crimea isn't resolved in a way that favors the longevity of of Ukraine, it's always going to be a problem. It's going to precipitate the next war. So they will go for it. And I just think that Putin is going to make that his last stand. I mean, that's going to be the most important stand he has, and he's going to go down with it. So be it. Then he goes down with it. That's just what happens. And yeah, the Siloviki may take him out. Are the Siloviki going to be willing to, the other Siloviki, are they going to be willing to give up Crimea for peace? I mean, that's a recipe to get, to become the target of the knife and back syndrome in the future. So I think that's going to be a real stickler. I think it's going to be extraordinarily difficult. And I believe what we heard today from, was it Zelensky? And I think we've heard it from Zelensky not too long ago, that they're just not going to give up any land. They're just not going to willingly give up land. They're just not going to. Even land that's occupied, their plan is to get it all back. And I think that's what they have to do. I think that's what they have to say. And I don't think the Russians are going to collapse to that. But that doesn't change the situation. Russia as a state is collapsing. Putin very well may die. I mean, he could die of old age. He could die of assassination. A lot of things could happen to him that would precipitate major changes. But I really firmly believe that we're getting way ahead of ourselves if we're thinking that Crimea is going to fall anytime soon. They're doing everything right to make it untenable. And I think it was we had a discussion before, and it was the lady from Canada. God, I can't think of her name. Who's on here all the time? She's in Ukraine right now.
Lexicon.
Lexicon, yeah. She and I had to talk about this before. And I said, I get what everybody wants. What would it make be untenable? I don't think it matters. There's nothing the Ukrainians can do that will make it untenable such that Putin will allow a retreat. I don't think there's anything. I mean, he will literally fight to the last person for Crimea. So be it. That may be what has to happen. But the Ukrainians are doing everything right now to make that option A, very, very likely, and B, doable. I mean, it's actionable. What they're doing now is making that decision a decision that Zelensky could sign on to. Yeah, okay. If that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. Then, you push to the coast and you go across the coast and you isolate it and you starve them out, and if you have to literally go door to door through Crimea, you go door to door through Crimea. They've done that kind of thing before in other places. It's ugly. You don't want to have to do it. Ukrainians will die. But I'm not shocked at all. I would not be shocked at all if the Kremlin has made the decision that will be the hill they will die on. And I think they will die on that hill. I mean, they're not gonna get what they want. I don't think. I may be wrong, but I don't think so.
No, that's right. I mean, the logistics that will end this war, or the work on the logistics that will end this war, will definitely cause Crimea to be lost. And if it keeps up, if we see another 3 months like we've seen in May, if you look at the mid-range strikes, the tactical take back of certain amount of land, just the inability of Russia to move forward and the capability being demonstrated by Ukraine to take back small bits of land, and the grinding loss. If Russia's not going to change its modus operandi, it is going to keep up the method of attack that it's been using in Konstantinivka. That's the only location where they're continuing to eke forward street by street. Liman, losing territory. Near Huliopoli, losing territory. Near Kamyansky on the former Kakovka Reservoir, losing territory. Ukraine has a net gain of 100 square kilometers in May. Right. It's 100 square kilometers, means nothing. But what we're talking about is tiny amounts of land in temporarily occupied territories lost. Net losses for Russia in May. Net losses for Russia in April. Net losses of Russia in February. This net loss builds up on the ground. And that will get worse and worse as logistics become interdicted more often. The ramp up of mid-range strikes is what we spent a lot of time talking about. There's no indication that Russia has developed any counter for that, and the scale of that is only growing each and every day, and there's no sign of that ending by Ukraine. So 3 more months of that is going to make logistics untenable in all of this area west of Mariupol and south into Crimea. Deep strikes. I don't want to use the word impunity, but I'll tell you what, it's close to it. When you can see Ukraine return to strike the Kronstadt naval base twice in a week when they didn't get everything they wanted, and literally fly around in circles for hours above St. Petersburg, waiting to their chance to hit targets while they watch previous drones go in. Folks, that demonstration is going to be painfully seared into the minds of Russians everywhere as they've degraded air defense. I mean, they've really worked hard to degrade the air defense in the temporarily occupied territories and in the border regions of Russia, now such that they can fly anywhere they want. Some are getting shot down, but the significant majority of these drones are now making it to destination, and those deep strikes are going to continue to pay huge dividends for Ukraine in reducing Russia's capacity to fight directly through military equipment that's not going to be able to be produced, and starving cash flow of Russia generally. But the stripping of their air defenses is only going to continue as it has today and yesterday, of assets to be able to see Ukraine coming and interdict that when they do see it coming. So that, and then naval activities are picking up in that Ukraine is now interdicting shipping. Stolen grain vessels are being attacked. The continuation of attacks on sanctioned vessels that are carrying oil or grain. Ukraine is continuing expanding its military activities here to coincide with its increased and continually increasing production. They're building their way out of this war the way that I've been talking about for a year, if they have to do it, but they're now doing it. And I think it's paying dividends even quicker than I thought that they were going to. And long may that continue, because if they really are able to take advantage of this supply deficit of Russia, I think the military in Russia could collapse quicker than we think. Dry fly?
I agree with everything you said, but I'm going to add one other point that people need to remember. So everyone's, oh yeah, we only got 100 square kilometers. That's 10 by 10. Okay, for people in freedom units, that's 6 miles by 6 miles. It's not very big. Okay? My town is way, way, way bigger than that.
Freedom
However,
units.
yeah, how I hear that from others all the time. Anyway, I wish I had coined that. I had heard that, so I will not take the attribution. But the kill is that these are the months where historically over the last 3 years where Russia did their most damage, coming out of winter and the ground solidifying. They've had their biggest months. So typically April, May, June were by far the months where they had some of their biggest gains of the year were in these months. And not only are they not getting those gains, they're losing territory. If you consider the net difference between what they were getting at this time and what they're getting now and actually losing, it's more like about it's a switch or a change, a flip of about 500,000 kilometers. It's some number like that. It's just a crazy square kilometer. It's just a crazy huge number, way more than what you would expect. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I remember maybe it's 500 or 600 kilometers square a month is the number. But the change in trend is far greater than the actual number, because usually by this time of the last 3 years, they will have lost 500, not gained 100. So it's just a much different scenario, and people need to look at trends, not just absolute numbers. Because sometimes the trends, you're an old engineer. We say the the second derivative is more important often than the first derivative, of a process. And the second derivative is very, very much in favor of Ukraine, much, much more so than the net change. That the trend line is very much going in their direction. And that was the thing that really, really caught my attention. And I forget who posted it. I don't think it was Beefy. It might have been Beefy, but it was one of those guys that's those reliable go-to mill bloggers who pointed out that by this time in the last 3 years, the Russians had already gobbled up a shit ton of land and were digesting it. And that's just not happening. That is absolutely not happening. And they've had the same number of attacks, at least until the last couple of days. They've had the same number of assaults, and the monthly kill ratio, the numbers of killed and wounded, removed from battle, whatever you want to call it, casualties, is as high or higher than many of those years. So it's just not looking good. People, you're not hearing the whole story because I don't think people who are in the know really want to publish it, and the people who aren't in the know don't understand it. But the trend is probably far worse for Russia than we know. And I'll listen.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely the trend. And I've never been a person to look at when Russia was making gains, and every time Ukraine has turned these around and made gains, I'm like, never look at the front line as anything other than a relative stalemate with the minor tactical positional changes. But that's all Ukraine has to do. That's all they have to do is hold the line and kill lots of Russians and eliminate a lot of their equipment and supplies coming toward the front and eliminate their strategic capability to support the war. And this is the thing. Everybody says, "Oh, but Russia will outlast them." Will they, though? Will they? I don't think so. Russia is a myth. The Russian economy is a myth that's not going to be able to do everything that they think they can do, and eventually they run up against foreign exchange and they'll destroy it. Look, the numbers that have come out today. Beefeaters posted the latest details of the travesty that is the internal market in in Russia, and Russians have withdrawn a record 30-year record of cash in May. So they're now withdrawing all these rubles from the bank. As soon as their check shows up, they withdraw it. But note the number here that might go missing in Beefeater's summary here, which is note that Russia has added a cumulative 14.8 billion US dollars in banknotes into the circulation since January. That means that there is a shitload of currency floating around inside Russia, in the hands of people who won't leave it in a bank because they don't want it to be taken from them or restricted. But that money, it isn't able to really buy anything anymore. And because of, things are just going to start running out. So inflation and hyperinflation is just around the corner if Russia continues to flood rubles into the marketplace to pay for things by doing the money go round that it's doing. This is not a good sign for Russia at all. And I think their system is a lot more brittle and fragile than we look at it from the outside. I don't think they have infinite capability, like the Financial Times said about several weeks ago, to keep this money go round up forever. I think Russia's a lot closer to financial collapse than it looks like. Dry fly?
Well, 100% agree. It's what we've been talking about. We've been looking for this for 2 or 3 years. When is the inflation going to show up? Because it had to happen. Nevertheless, it's done a hell of a job to slow it down, but you can't fight. You just can't fight gravity. Gravity still applies, and it's something that I'm just amazed that it took this long. But she did some magic to keep the wheels on, but the wheels are falling off. And again, I would encourage people, if you understand what the hell we're talking about, why, how could it go bad so quickly? Why didn't we notice it, or what's going to go to your Google AI function? It's free. It's a free AI, cheap El Cheapo version, but it works. And type an inflection point and second derivative, and let it tell you all about how trends can be looking like they're stable and sustainable until you hit an inflection point. But it was all predicted earlier. If you looked at the second derivative, how things were changing internally underneath the surface, you would see that it was going to flip. It had to flip. The momentum, there was no momentum to hold it on a sustainable path forever. And they're quickly reaching the point where it's going to be unsustainable. I mean, really unsustainable, where you're going to have buckets of money and you're not going to be able to buy anything because there isn't going to be any food in the stores, or minimal amounts of food. And it was so funny because in the start of the war, remember all those videos we got? Look at the stores in Moscow. People are still shopping. The stores are all full of stuff. And
Yeah, look at Tucker Carlson.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So I saw all that stuff, and I kept telling people, and it was on some of the other sites, and I don't want to name names, but I think we all know the kind where you get the guys up and say, well, the economy isn't really collapsing. It's doing good. And they were supposedly pro-Ukrainian. I mean, ostensibly they are, but they just didn't understand economics, and they didn't see that you can't fight a war like this indefinitely without one of two things. Either you have massive inflation, or you do all but confiscate the wealth of the population. One of the two. Okay. By wealth, I mean the working, the labor of the people. They have to build munitions ultimately for free. You can give them bonds, but the bonds aren't worth anything. You basically need the equivalent of slave labor camps if this is going to go on forever. And you saw this in the United States. I mean, we had huge amounts of debt coming out of World War II, and all of those war bonds. Well, that was what it was. And as soon as the war was over, we had huge inflation, because that was when the war bonds stopped and people started cashing them in. And you can't have a free lunch. Well, Russia has been playing way fast and loose, way more so than the U.S. did in the 1940s. This is unsustainable, and it's just a matter now. It's just a matter of time.
Or if you look at the Russian economy and what they've tried to do, patterned after quantitative easing that was done after the global financial crisis in America, they're treating quantitative easing as if it is a permanent tool by which they can manage, which is just a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it's 100%. It's the problem I've been pointing to in the United States, why we can't bail out Russia, okay? Because we don't have the resources anymore to do that, okay? We have gotten close to tapping out because of the debt that's due and the constraints that are on the Federal Reserve right now.
And nobody's scared of you anymore. Are Americans
Exactly.
talking about the fact that
No one.
Donald Trump can't even bully Israel anymore?
No one. I mean, the only people that are doing it are the lefties on Twitter. But if you walk up and down the street, if you go to Walmart, if you look at if you look at the reporting, and I occasionally do, I try to stay away from media because it drives me crazy. But the little reporting I see, no one knows. And I'll tell you, even my family members don't understand it. It's only a handful of us who really watch these numbers closely, who get it. My son gets it. But even my wife, who just hates this stuff, she refuses to see it. And she's even amazed at when people break down the numbers for her. She's like, good God, this is a disaster. And we only do it a couple times a year when we talk to our retirement people, because I'm like, I've got like the most conservative portfolio you can imagine, because I figure it's going to evaporate on me. I think it's just going to absolutely fucking evaporate. Okay, when the shit hits the fan on this stuff. But the point is that almost no Americans are. If you walked around the streets of America today and you just looked for a sign that people knew that the shit was hitting the fan, they know personally that their finances are in trouble. They know personally. You could see it in Walmart, the checkout lines. You could see it, except for the top 15, 20%. You go to an elite, wealthy suburb, they have no fucking clue. But if you go to any place that's 80% of the income or lower, okay, people know they're stressed. They know that they're getting squeezed. but they haven't associated it yet with why. They haven't figured out that it was 2 decades of bad economic policy that now came to a head because of catastrophically bad policy in the short run. We could have gotten out of this if we kept good relations with our allies and figured out a long-term plan to refinance this debt. Okay, we would have been okay. We would have been squeezed, but we wouldn't have been crushed. We'll be crushed. Well, Russia is in orders of magnitude worse situation. Absolutely orders of magnitude worse. And that they do not have much time. That second derivative thing is really impacting them now. They have gone from it being just shrinking to them going on the other side of the curve. And again, if people don't know what the hell I'm talking about, review your college math if you had it. And if you didn't have it, like I said, go to Google. It'll once you understand it, it'll become like, oh yeah, I get it. I get what they're saying. It's the inflection point. It's where the pressure, the force that's been pushing on these economic factors gets to the point where it goes negative. You just can't fight it anymore. And there are mathematical relationships, and Will and I could go into great detail with that. But you don't need to know that. You just need to know that they're at an inflection point that they cannot recover from. And how soon do they realize that? That's hard to say. How soon does it get catastrophic? That's where we're waiting for the black swan. And there are a lot of black swans that could take this thing down. It isn't just, I mean, it could be the fact that you just have fuel issues at the time harvest hits. So if they still have diesel problems in, say, September, October, and they can't get the crops in, that's a black swan. That's a huge black swan. And there are guys in the, if you read the Telegram, I don't read Telegram itself, I read people who report on Telegram, and I'm telling you, they're talking about that. They're saying, holy shit, if this diesel situation doesn't get straightened out by September, we are really, really fucked. Like, 1917 fucked, not 1991 fucked. And I can't argue with that. I think they're right. There are so many things that are working against Russia that a lot of us saw coming, okay? But they ignored or just believed that they could buffalo through. And the West did not look at it truthfully for a number of reasons. Some of it, I'm sure, was propaganda and bias, but some of it, I think, is just plain ignorance on the part of the media. The media doesn't know what is really important. And I'll listen.
Well, and it's in the owners of the media's best interest to keep things afloat as they are.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that will be a big problem. I mean, look, we know from looking at the springtime issues that Russia is not importing the high quality seed. They're not planting as much area. If they then have problems getting in crops, the lower amount of lower quality crops that they put in, it's what we were talking about a couple of years ago, Dry Fly. Eventually, all this stuff manifests itself as literally starvation or changed diet inside Russia, which they experienced in the short term in 1991, and they could have that sort of catastrophe problem again if they don't recognize things. And looking back, probably if you look back at the macroeconomic indicators, about a year ago, around the SPIEF last year, was when Russia was making up this fantasy about separating their economy into the military side and the non-military side to try to make a claim that they're not in a recession. They made up this fantasy back then that we were talking about. You can't just ignore half of your economy and say that part doesn't matter because this part's doing great. That might have been the time at which making up that fantasy and failing to address the real problems inside the Russian economy because of the war, failing to do that at that time might have been if you look at the second derivative of where they were going, that might have been the inflection point when not doing something about it then and making up a fantasy is what really drove them into absolute ruin that they weren't going to recover from. Something like that, when we look back, will probably be what we see, I guess. But Adam, what you better see soon, since it's 11:25 in the evening. Well, no, it's probably only about 10:25 for you in the evening, maybe. But you probably better get to bed here pretty soon. And if we go much longer, we're just going to hand over to Mockers.
Well, yeah, as long as Prince is ready to go. She just messaged she needed 5 minutes, but it was a couple of minutes ago already. Yeah, great discussion,
Well,
guys.
she ignored starting us up, but so she might as well ignore shutting us down.
Oh, we don't want to make that contest because we're an hour and a half overdue. So she's going to win that time match.
It'll be just at a space abandoned here, waiting around for when Mockers shows up. Nobody will be in it.
Oh, you guys are funny. You guys are funny. Real funny.
Right. So, Adam, thanks very much for sitting in with an accidental Ukrainian. It's been excellent sitting with you for 3.5 hours of our 2-hour schedule. Look forward to talking to you next week. But I won't be looking forward to your show tomorrow with Alan because I think that's going to get canceled. So you got all your air on time with me. And I'll say Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava.
Slava Nazi.
Svetvaraham.
And Svertos Muskovich. That is all, folks. The Mockers will be up in a few more hours with Firefella. Hang around or do something in the interim, and then
It's
come
not
back for that.
Mockers today.
Oh, no Mockers today.
Office day, yeah.
Yeah, that Nick soup.
Oh boy, listen to that then. Soup's always good.
Yeah, Vetnik soup in Firefella.
So there you go. A few hours
Less
from that.
cat interruptions.
Yeah, and I will. I'll see you guys all tomorrow after Mockers is on the radio with Joanna in our Wednesday slot.
And I guess with that, I'll say Scarobobochimus and shut us down. Have a good night.
Bobochimus.
Join us for the radio. We look forward to seeing you again. Your audience. Your audience.